Hey there, and welcome to Crime for Sleep. I know you're having trouble falling asleep, so let me keep you company with true crime stories from around the world. Before we dive in, I'm curious, where did you first hear this one? If you enjoy these stories, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Now get comfortable, and let's get into tonight's case. Crime 1, I never paid attention to that mat, just a cheap one that came with the house. But when I lifted it to sweep underneath, I noticed grooves carved into the concrete, straight lines, shallow but intentional. I assumed it was wear and tear until I looked closer. The scratches weren't random. They formed letters, one word, stay. I thought it was a prank until the same message appeared under every rug, every doormat I owned. Always scratched, always hidden. Then I noticed one beneath my mattress. The house had been empty for months before I moved in. The previous tenant left suddenly, according to the landlord. Personal reasons, he said, avoiding eye contact. I found this out when I called about the security deposit. Apparently, she never asked for it back, just vanished, leaving behind a forwarded address that led nowhere. I started photographing every scratch I found. Under the bathroom mat, carved into the tile grout. Beneath the kitchen runner, etched into the linoleum. Always the same word, always hidden. The tool marks were fresh, the concrete dust still visible in some crevices. Someone had been busy, methodical. Someone who knew exactly where people stepped, where they never looked. The neighbor mentioned seeing lights in the house during those empty months. Strange patterns, she said, like someone was moving through rooms with a flashlight, but the power had been shut off. I checked with the utility company myself. No electricity for 4 months, yet she swore she saw those lights dancing across the walls. I found the first photograph tucked inside a cookbook I'd never opened. A woman I didn't recognize standing in what looked like my kitchen. Same countertops, same window placement. She was smiling, but her eyes looked tired, hollow. On the back, someone had written before in careful script. I searched the house for more photos, more clues about who she was. The scratches multiplied. Under my coffee table, gouged into the hardwood. Beneath the area rug by the fireplace, scored into the stone hearth, each one precise, deliberate. I measured them, identical depth, identical spacing. Someone had used the same tool, the same pressure, the same methodical approach. This wasn't random vandalism. This was a message, a warning, a command. I started lifting everything, every piece of furniture, every decorative object, every surface that could hide something beneath. The pattern became clear. Wherever someone would naturally stand, wherever feet would rest, there was a scratch. By the sink, by the bed, by the front door. Someone had mapped out a life, predicted movements, marked every spot where a person would pause. The second photograph appeared under my pillow. Same woman, same kitchen, but she looked different, thinner, more anxious. Her smile seemed forced, her posture defensive. During was written on the back in the same careful handwriting. I compared it to the first photo. Definitely the same person, but changed, worn down by something I couldn't identify. I called the landlord again, pressed him for details about the previous tenant. He grew uncomfortable, mentioned that she'd been having problems with someone, an ex-boyfriend maybe, or a stalker. She'd changed the locks twice, installed cameras, but nothing seemed to help. She felt watched, followed, cornered. Then one morning she was gone. The scratches began appearing faster than I could document them. Under my desk chair, carved into the wooden floor. Beneath the doormat inside the closet, etched into the carpet padding. Someone was still coming, still marking territory, still leaving their signature. I installed my own cameras, changed my own locks, but the scratches kept appearing. The third photograph showed up in my medicine cabinet. Same woman, same kitchen, but now she looked terrified. Her eyes were wide, her hands shaking as she gripped the counter. After was written on the back, but the handwriting was different, shaky, desperate, nothing like the careful script of the first two photos. She knew something was wrong, knew she was being hunted. I started sleeping with a hammer by my bed. Every creak, every settling sound made me freeze. I'd check the cameras obsessively, but they showed nothing. Just empty rooms, undisturbed furniture, shadows that moved in ways that seemed natural. Yet every morning there were new scratches, fresh gouges in surfaces I'd checked the night before. The pattern became an obsession. I mapped every scratch, every location, every angle. They formed a route through the house, a path someone had walked repeatedly, marking their presence, claiming their territory. From the front door to the bedroom, from the kitchen to the bathroom, a complete circuit of surveillance and control. I found the fourth photograph in the freezer, wrapped in plastic. Same woman, but this time she wasn't in the kitchen. She was standing by a window, looking out at something I couldn't see. Her face was barely visible, but her body language screamed panic. On the back, someone had written "now" in that same shaky handwriting. But the photo looked recent, the digital timestamp only weeks old. The realization hit me like cold water. The woman in the photographs wasn't the previous tenant. The kitchen wasn't quite right, different appliances, different lighting. I compared the photos to my own space, measuring angles, checking details. It was my kitchen, but changed, updated. The photos were taken in my house, but they showed someone else living here. I stopped sleeping, started checking every inch of the house repeatedly, looking for cameras, for hiding spots, for any sign of intrusion. The scratches were everywhere now, under my toothbrush holder, beneath my coffee mug, under the soap dispenser. Someone was documenting my habits, my routines, my predictable patterns. The fifth photograph appeared on my nightstand while I was in the shower. Same woman, but older, more defeated. She was sitting at my kitchen table, staring at something in her hands. I couldn't make out what it was, but her expression was pure despair. On the back, someone had written "always" in block letters that looked rushed, angry. I realized the woman in the photos wasn't the previous tenant. She was the tenant before that and the one before that. The scratches weren't recent, they were layered, accumulated over time. Multiple tools, multiple hands, multiple warnings carved into the same surfaces. Generations of victims, all leaving the same message, all trying to warn the next person. The house wasn't just watched, it was studied. Every woman who lived here was cataloged, documented, hunted. The scratches were their attempts to communicate, to leave evidence, to prove they existed. Someone was selecting tenants carefully, choosing women who fit a pattern, who would react predictably to being stalked. I packed my bags that night, but when I reached for the front door, I found one final scratch. Fresh, deep, still dusting the concrete with powder. Not "stay" this time, just my name carved with precision into the threshold. Someone knew I was leaving. Someone had been watching me pack. The photographs were still there when I returned the next morning, all of them arranged on my kitchen table like a timeline. But now there was a sixth photo, me, standing in my kitchen, looking at the other photographs. I was holding this exact image, creating an infinite loop of surveillance and documentation. I never found out who took the photos. I never discovered who carved the scratches, but I know they're still there, still watching, still waiting. The house is occupied again. I checked the rental listings online. A new woman moved in last month, and I wonder if she's lifted the welcome mat yet. I wonder if she's found the scratches, the photographs, the warnings left behind. Sometimes I drive past the house just to see if the lights are on. They always are, but they move in patterns that don't match human behavior. Systematic, methodical, like someone is documenting every corner, every surface, every hiding spot, preparing for the next phase of whatever sick game this is. The scratches under my new apartment's welcome mat are still fresh. Crime 2, it was stuck from the day I moved in. A shallow drawer beneath the counter that refused to budge. One day I pried it open with a screwdriver. Inside was a single envelope, yellowed and sealed with wax. No writing, just weight. When I opened it, I found dozens of human teeth, each marked with a tiny symbol carved into the enamel. I thought maybe they were antiques, some creepy collection. But one still had a fresh trace of blood on it. And the next night I found a tooth on my pillow. Not mine. The apartment came furnished, the landlord had said. Previous tenant left everything behind. I never asked why. The rent was too good to question, and I needed a place fast. The kitchen had that lived-in feeling, coffee stains on the counter, a faint smell of something sweet and metallic that cleaning products couldn't quite erase. I kept the envelope hidden in my bedroom drawer for weeks, checking it obsessively. The teeth were different sizes, some small like a child's, others large molars with deep grooves. Each symbol was precisely carved, deliberate. A circle with a line through it, a triangle with dots, a star with too many points. They meant something to someone. The tooth on my pillow was fresh, still warm. I checked my mouth frantically, running my tongue over every surface, but nothing was missing. Nothing hurt. I called in sick to work that day, spent hours searching the apartment for any sign of forced entry. The locks were secure, the windows painted shut. No one could have gotten in. That's when I started watching the building. From my window, I could see the other tenants coming and going. The woman in the unit below mine walked differently at night, slower, more careful. She carried a small bag that she never had during the day. The man across the courtyard kept his curtains drawn, but I could see him watching through the gaps when I turned my lights on. I found the dental records in the basement storage room. My key shouldn't have worked on that lock, but it did. Boxes of files, patient charts, x-rays. The dentist's office had been here before the apartments were converted. The previous tenant, I realized, had been the dentist. The charts were detailed, meticulous. But some pages were torn out, names blacked out with thick marker. The woman downstairs answered her door on the third knock. She was younger than I expected, with perfect teeth that caught the hallway light. She invited me in without asking why I was there. Her apartment was identical to mine, but reversed, like looking in a mirror. She offered me coffee in a cup that was too small for my hands. "You found them," she said, not a question. Her voice was steady, practiced. "I wondered when you would." I didn't tell her about the tooth on my pillow. Didn't mention the symbols, but she knew. She pulled out a small notebook and showed me sketches of the same markings. Pages and pages of them, drawn with the precision of someone who had been studying them for a long time. "He kept records of everything," she said. "Every procedure, every patient, but not just the dental work. He kept other things too, personal things, things that mattered to people." She told me about the complaints that never made it to the authorities, patients who came in for routine cleanings and left with gaps in their memory, children who cried when they saw needles, adults who developed unexplained phobias. The dental practice had closed suddenly, overnight. The building sat empty for months before the conversion. The teeth were his trophies, she said, but they weren't just from procedures. Some of them were taken while people were unconscious. Others were removed from the dead. I asked her how she knew all this. She smiled, and her perfect teeth seemed less perfect, more calculated. She had been his assistant, she said, before she became his patient, before she became something else. The notebook contained addresses, phone numbers, dates. A careful record of everyone who had been to the office, everyone who had lost something. I recognized my own address, but the name next to it wasn't mine. It was the name of a child, a patient who had come in for a routine cleaning and never left. That's why you're here, she said. In his apartment, in his space. You're living with what he left behind. I asked her about the tooth on my pillow. She shrugged as if it was obvious. He's still collecting, even now. The apartment remembers. The spaces between the walls remember. Sometimes the past doesn't stay buried. She showed me photographs then, hidden in the back of the notebook. Pictures of the office, the chair, the instruments, but also pictures of people sleeping, in their beds, in their homes. The same small bag visible in each frame, the one she carried at night. I tried to stop him, she said, but some habits are harder to break than others. Some collections keep growing even when the collector is gone. I left her apartment with more questions than answers. The teeth were still in my drawer, still marked with their strange symbols. But now I understood that they weren't just random collections. They were a catalog, a record of lives interrupted, of trust betrayed, of procedures that went too far. The building felt different after that conversation. The hallways seemed longer, the shadows deeper. I started checking my teeth every morning, counting them, making sure they were all still there. I changed the locks on my door, but the key still worked on other locks in the building, locks that shouldn't have matched. I found more envelopes hidden throughout the apartment, behind the refrigerator, taped under the sink, stuffed inside the light fixtures. Each one contained more teeth, more symbols, more evidence of something that had gone on for years without anyone noticing. The woman downstairs was right about one thing. The past doesn't stay buried. It finds ways to surface, to continue its work through new hands. I've started carrying a small bag when I go out at night. I tell myself it's for protection, but I know that's not entirely true. Sometimes I catch myself studying people's smiles, wondering what stories their teeth might tell, wondering what symbols they might carry, what records they might complete. The drawer in the kitchen isn't empty anymore. It's full of possibilities, of collections that need to be finished, of work that was left undone. I still live in the apartment, still sleep in the bed where someone else's dreams once lived. Still use the kitchen where procedures were planned and trophies were stored. The teeth keep appearing one by one in places where they shouldn't be. On my pillow, in my coffee cup, between the pages of books I'm reading. I've stopped trying to figure out where they come from. Instead, I've started trying to figure out where they need to go. The symbols are starting to make sense, forming patterns that guide me through the city, through the building, through the spaces between what people say and what they really mean. The collection isn't finished, it may never be finished, but it's growing again, and I'm the one helping it grow. The woman downstairs waves when she sees me in the hallway. She knows what I'm becoming. She knows what the apartment does to people who stay too long. But I can't leave, not yet, not while there are still teeth to collect, still symbols to carve, still records to complete. The drawer in the kitchen is full now, but there are other drawers, other apartments, other people who smile without knowing what their smiles might cost them. The past has a way of making itself present, and I'm learning to be a very good assistant. Crime 3, the soil was rich, too rich. My vegetables grew bigger than they should have. I thought I was just lucky. Then the tiller caught on something hard. I assumed it was a rock, but it wasn't. It was a jawbone, human. I called someone I trusted. We kept digging and found more. Femurs, ribs, a partial skull. Then we stopped, because right beneath the tomato patch there was a wooden box, not a coffin, something smaller. Inside were locks of hair, baby clothes, and a sealed plastic bag containing a folded letter. The first line said, "You found them. Good." I sat in my kitchen, staring at that letter for what felt like forever. The paper was yellowed, but not old enough to crumble. Someone had written this recently. someone who knew I would find those bones, someone who wanted me to. The handwriting was careful, deliberate, feminine. The ink was blue, from a ballpoint pen that had been pressed firmly into the paper. Each letter formed with precision, like someone taking their time to make sure every word was perfect. You found them good. I've been waiting for someone to care enough to look. The others never did. They walked over this ground for years, never wondering why the flowers bloomed so bright, why the grass grew so thick. You're different, you noticed. I folded the letter back up and walked to my living room window. The garden stretched out before me, suddenly looking different. The tomatoes I'd been so proud of, the roses that had won compliments from neighbors, the patch of herbs that had flourished beyond anything I'd ever grown before, all of it fed by what lay beneath. The next morning I drove to the local records office. The clerk was helpful, pulling files about my property's history. The house had been built in the early 60s. Before that, it had been farmland. Before that, undeveloped. Nothing unusual in the paperwork. No missing persons reports filed from this address. No police calls. Nothing. But there was a gap, a period of 3 years where the property had changed hands 4 times. Quick sales, each one. People who'd bought the house and left within months. The pattern was strange enough to make me wonder what they'd all run from. I spent the afternoon at the library scrolling through old newspapers on microfilm. Missing persons reports from decades past. Children who'd vanished. Adults who'd simply disappeared. The faces stared back at me from grainy photographs, their families pleading for information that never came. One case caught my attention, a woman who lived not far from my street. She'd been reported missing by her sister, but the report had been filed and quickly closed. No investigation, no follow-up, just a note that she'd left town voluntarily. But something about her photo nagged at me. The shape of her jaw, the way her hair fell across her forehead. I drove home as evening approached, the letter still in my pocket. I'd read it so many times I had it memorized, but there was more text below that first paragraph, more I hadn't been ready to process. The children came first, then the others, people no one would miss, or so they thought, but someone always misses, someone always wonders. You're wondering now, aren't you? You're starting to understand that your beautiful garden isn't just lucky soil. My hands shook as I unlocked my front door. The house felt different now, like it was watching me. I walked to the kitchen and pulled out the letter again, spreading it flat on the table under the bright overhead light. Check the basement behind the furnace. There's a loose brick 3rd row from the floor. You'll find more letters there, more names, more stories. Each one someone's daughter, someone's son, someone's mother. Each one forgotten by everyone except me. I'd never paid much attention to my basement. It was just a place to store old boxes and house the furnace. But now I found myself standing at the top of the stairs, looking down into the darkness. The wooden steps creaked under my weight as I descended, flashlight in hand. The basement smelled of damp earth and something else, something sweet and cloying that made my stomach turn. I made my way to the furnace, an old oil-burning unit that had been there since the house was built. The brick wall behind it was rough, uneven. I ran my fingers along the 3rd row until I found it, a brick that moved when I pressed it. Behind it was a metal box, smaller than a shoebox but heavy. Inside were dozens of letters, all in the same careful handwriting, each one addressed to a different name. Names I'd seen in those old newspaper clippings. Names that had been forgotten by everyone except the person who'd written these letters. I opened one at random. The paper was newer than the others, the ink still dark. Dear Sarah, I know you're reading this. I know you found my garden. I know you're wondering who I am, why I did this, why I'm telling you now. The truth is I'm tired. tired of carrying their stories alone, tired of being the only one who remembers their faces, their voices, their last words. My breath caught Sarah, my name. This letter was written specifically for me. You're probably thinking about calling the police. Don't. They had their chance. They chose not to look, not to care, not to dig deeper when these people disappeared. They filed reports and closed cases and moved on. But I never moved on. I kept them safe. I kept them together. I kept them remembered. I sat on the basement floor, surrounded by letters from a stranger who somehow knew me, who'd planned for me to find this, who'd been waiting for me to care enough to dig. The final letter was different from the others. Thicker paper, sealed with wax. My name was written across the front in gold ink. Sarah, you have a choice to make. You can call the authorities and let them turn my garden into a crime scene. Let them bag the bones and file reports and eventually close the case when they can't find me. Or you can understand what I've been trying to tell you. These weren't victims. They were survivors. Survivors of things worse than death. People who came to me broken, hopeless, begging for peace. I dropped the letter, my hands shaking. The basement felt smaller, the air thicker. I could hear my own heartbeat echoing off the walls. I gave them what they wanted, what they needed, a place to rest, a place to be remembered, a place where someone would tend their memory like a garden. Now that responsibility passes to you. You can choose to honor what I've built here, or you can destroy it. I climbed the stairs on unsteady legs, the letters clutched in my arms. In my kitchen, I spread them out on the table, dozens of stories of people who'd disappeared, people who'd been forgotten, people who'd found their way to my backyard. But as I read, something else became clear. The dates on the letters, the progression of handwriting, the way the tone shifted from letter to letter, becoming more confident, more certain, more practiced. This wasn't the work of one person, it was the work of many, each one inheriting the garden from the one before. Each one chosen because they'd care enough to dig, to question, to uncover the truth. I walked to my window and looked out at the garden. The tomatoes were ripening in the late afternoon sun. The roses were blooming brighter than ever. The herbs were so fragrant I could smell them through the glass. Somewhere in that rich, dark soil were the remains of people who'd chosen to disappear. People who'd found peace in my backyard, people who'd trusted someone to remember them. And now that someone was me. I folded the letters carefully and placed them back in the metal box. Then I walked to my basement and returned the box to its hiding place behind the loose brick. As I pressed the brick back into place, I noticed something I'd missed before. Scratches in the mortar, initials, a record of everyone who'd found this box before me. Tomorrow I would tend my garden. I would water the tomatoes and prune the roses and harvest the herbs. I would care for the soil that had been enriched by stories I was only beginning to understand. But tonight I would write a letter of my own, a letter for the next person who would notice that the vegetables grew too big, the flowers bloomed too bright, the grass grew too thick. A letter for the next person who would care enough to dig. Because someone always does. Crime 4, my backyard is fenced in. There's no easy way in unless you jump. I started noticing my dog acting strange, restless, anxious, but only in the mornings. Then one day I found a fresh bowl of meat near his kennel. I never put it there. I checked my cameras, but they'd been shut off. Not glitched, shut off. I stayed up and waited. What I saw made my stomach turn. A figure in all black, crouching beside my dog, whispering something. And then my dog lay down like he knew them. Like this had happened before. The first thing I did was call the police. The officer who came was polite but dismissive. No signs of forced entry, no stolen property, no actual harm done, just someone feeding my dog. He suggested I get better cameras, maybe motion sensors. I nodded along, but something cold settled in my chest. The way my dog had responded to that stranger wasn't normal. Dogs don't just lie down for anyone. They certainly don't act like they're following commands from someone they've never met. I installed new cameras that night. Motion activated, night vision, the works. I also started keeping a journal, writing down every detail I could remember. The stranger's height, the way they moved, the fact that they'd whispered something. What do you whisper to a dog that makes them obey instantly? I found myself checking the locks on my doors multiple times before bed. 3 days passed without incident. My dog seemed calmer, more like his old self. I started wondering if maybe the stranger had gotten spooked and moved on. Then I found the second bowl. This time it wasn't just meat. There were small white pills mixed in with the food. My hands shook as I bagged everything up. I called the police again, this time demanding they take it seriously. They took the bowl, promised to run tests, and told me to be patient. The pills turned out to be a mild sedative. Nothing lethal, just enough to make a dog drowsy and compliant. The officer who called with the results sounded more interested now. He asked if I'd had any disputes with neighbors, any recent breakups, anyone who might have a grudge. I went through my life methodically, but nothing stood out. I worked from home, keep to myself, barely know my neighbors beyond polite waves. That's when I started thinking about the timing. The stranger always came in the early morning, just before dawn. They knew my schedule somehow. They knew when I'd be asleep, when my dog would be alone outside. I began staying awake, watching from my bedroom window with the lights off. My sleep schedule crumbled, but I couldn't stop. Every shadow in the yard made my heart race. On the 5th night of watching, I saw them again. Same dark clothing, same careful movements, but this time I was ready. I crept downstairs and slipped out the back door while they were focused on my dog. I stayed low, using the fence for cover, and managed to get close enough to hear what they were saying. It wasn't words, it was a tune, a soft, repetitive melody that sounded familiar but I couldn't place. My dog's tail wagged slowly as he listened. The stranger reached out and scratched behind his ears with the familiarity of an old friend. That's when I realized what I was seeing. This wasn't a random stranger. This was someone who knew my dog, someone who had trained him. My dog hadn't always been mine. I'd adopted him from a shelter 2 years ago after his previous owner died. The paperwork was minimal, just a name, age, and basic medical records. I'd never thought to dig deeper into his history. But now I wondered who that previous owner had been and who else might have been part of his life. The next morning I drove to the shelter. The staff member who helped me was new, but she pulled up the old records. The previous owner's name was listed, along with an address across town. What caught my attention was a note in the margin. Family member may visit dog during adjustment period. There was no name attached to the note, no contact information. I sat in my car outside the shelter, staring at that address. The previous owner had been an elderly woman who lived alone. If she'd had family, why hadn't they taken the dog when she died? Why would they wait 2 years to start visiting him? And why the secrecy? Why not just knock on my door and ask to see him? That evening I did something I'd never done before. I brought my dog inside for the night. He whined at the door, restless and confused. He kept looking toward the backyard like he was expecting someone. I realized then that these visits had been going on longer than I'd known, probably since I'd first adopted him. The stranger hadn't just started coming recently, I'd only just started noticing. I spent the night researching the previous owner online. Her obituary mentioned a daughter living out of state, but no other family. There were no photos, no additional details, but I did find something else. A police report from 6 months after the woman's death, a break-in at her house which had been sitting empty. Nothing stolen, no damage, just signs that someone had been inside going through personal belongings. The pieces started forming a picture I didn't want to see. Someone who'd had access to the house, who'd known about the dog, who'd waited until the property was clear before searching for something. Someone who'd then tracked down where the dog had gone and started visiting him regularly. But why? What could an old woman's dog possibly know or have that would be worth this much trouble? I called the police again, this time with all my research. The officer who took my call sounded tired. He pointed out that I still had no proof of any actual crime. Feeding someone's dog, even with mild sedatives, was at worst a misdemeanor. The break-in at the dead woman's house was a separate case, already closed due to lack of evidence. Unless I could prove the stranger had stolen something or intended harm, their hands were tied. That night I made a decision. I set up a camera in the backyard, but this time I didn't hide it. I wanted the stranger to see it. I wanted them to know I was watching. Then I sat by my back door with my phone ready, waiting for them to show up. I was done being passive. I was done being afraid. They came just before dawn, as always, but this time they saw the camera immediately. They stood at the edge of my yard for a long moment, just staring at it. Then they looked directly at my back door. Even through the darkness, I could feel their gaze. They knew I was watching. They knew I was there. What they did next changed everything. They walked straight to my back door and knocked. 3 soft taps, almost polite. My dog started barking, but it wasn't an alarm bark. It was excitement, recognition, joy. I opened the door with my phone in my hand, ready to call for help. The stranger was smaller than I'd expected, hunched with age, wearing a dark hoodie that obscured their face. When they looked up at me, I saw the eyes of an old woman, tired, sad, but not threatening. "I'm sorry," she said. Her voice was barely a whisper. "I know this looks strange, but he was my mother's dog. He's all I have left of her." The daughter from out of state, the one who hadn't taken the dog when her mother died. I stared at her, processing. Why didn't you just ask? Why all the secrecy? She pulled back her hood, revealing thin gray hair and a face marked by grief. Because I gave him up. When my mother died, I was dealing with the funeral, the estate, everything. I lived too far away to take him. I thought I was doing the right thing. Her eyes filled with tears. But I've regretted it every day since. My dog had stopped barking and was pressing against the door, trying to get to her. She knelt down, and he immediately nuzzled against her hand through the gap. The familiarity between them was undeniable. This wasn't a stranger. This was family. "The sedatives," I said. "Why were you drugging him?" She looked ashamed. He would get so excited when I left. He'd bark and carry on. I was afraid you'd wake up and call the police. I thought if I gave him something to help him sleep after my visits, it would be kinder. I never meant to hurt him. I stood there in my doorway, watching this elderly woman say goodbye to a dog she'd loved and lost. Part of me was angry about the deception, the fear I'd lived with for weeks, but another part of me understood. Grief makes people do strange things. Love makes people take risks they'd never normally take. "You could have just asked," I said again, but gentler this time. She nodded, wiping her eyes. "I know. I was afraid you'd say no. I was afraid you'd think I was crazy. I was afraid you'd move him somewhere I couldn't find him." I looked down at my dog, who was now whimpering softly, torn between his loyalty to me and his love for her. The decision I made in that moment wasn't about right or wrong. It was about what felt human. "What was his name?" I asked, "before I adopted him?" She smiled through her tears. His name was Bear, but my mother called him her little guardian angel. I opened the door wider and stepped back. "Would you like to come in? I think we have a lot to talk about." As she walked into my house, I realized that sometimes the most frightening mysteries have the most heartbreaking explanations. Sometimes the stranger in your backyard isn't a threat at all. Sometimes they're just someone who loves the same dog you do, trying to hold onto the last piece of a life that's already gone. But as I closed the door behind her, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was still more to this story. The break-in at her mother's house, the careful timing of her visits, the way she'd managed to track down where her mother's dog had gone. Love might explain her actions, but it didn't explain how easily she'd found me, how long she'd been watching before she'd started visiting. Some questions, I realized, might be better left unanswered, but they'd be there, waiting in the back of my mind, reminding me that even the most innocent explanations can hide deeper truths. The stranger wasn't a stranger at all, but somehow that made everything even more unsettling. Crime 5, I was applying for a passport and needed to verify my identity. When I went to the county records office, the clerk looked at me strange and left the room. I got curious and peeked at the computer. On the screen was a missing persons report with my face on it. Same photo, same features, even the same scar on my eyebrow, but the name wasn't mine. And according to the report, that person vanished 6 years ago in a state I've never been to. Or at least I don't remember going there. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as I stared at the screen, my reflection ghosting over the digital image. The scar above my left eyebrow, the one I got falling off my bike as a kid, was identical. Even the slight asymmetry in my smile, something I'd always been self-conscious about, was perfectly mirrored in this stranger's photograph. When the clerk returned with her supervisor, I pretended to be reading a pamphlet about vital records. They whispered in hushed tones, glancing at me every few seconds. I caught fragments, unusual situation and need to verify, and something about contacting authorities. My palms grew damp against the laminated brochure. I left without my passport paperwork, claiming I'd forgotten a document at home. The drive back felt endless, every traffic light giving me more time to think about what I'd seen. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept touching the scar, running my finger along the raised skin, wondering if it was really mine. The next morning I called in sick to work and drove to the library. The missing persons report had mentioned a case number, and I'd memorized it. The librarian helped me access newspaper archives, and within an hour I found the article. The missing person had been a college student, described as quiet and studious, who disappeared after leaving their dorm room one evening. The family had offered a substantial reward for information. But here's what unsettled me most. The description matched not just my appearance, but details I'd never told anyone. A birthmark on my shoulder blade, a slight limp in my left leg from an old injury. Even my habit of unconsciously tapping my fingers when nervous, the article mentioned this as a distinguishing characteristic. I spent the next few days combing through my own memories, looking for gaps. My childhood felt solid enough, but there were fuzzy periods in my early 20s. I'd always attributed them to stress or the natural haziness of memory. Now I wondered if there was something more deliberate about those blank spaces. My apartment suddenly felt foreign. I examined my belongings with new eyes. The photo album seemed too sparse, too carefully curated. My high school yearbook had pages that looked like they'd been carefully torn out. When I called my old roommate to ask about those missing years, they gave vague answers and changed the subject quickly. The missing person's family had set up a website with more photos and details. I found myself scrolling through it compulsively, studying every image, every piece of information. There were pictures of a childhood bedroom that felt familiar, family gatherings where I could almost place myself among the faces, even though I'd never seen these people before. I decided to contact the family directly. The mother answered the phone, and when I explained who I was, her sharp intake of breath was audible through the static. She agreed to meet me at a coffee shop halfway between our locations. She arrived carrying a manila envelope thick with documents. Her hands shook as she spread photographs across the table between us. Baby pictures, school photos, family vacations, all featuring someone who looked exactly like me at every stage of development. But the memories attached to these images weren't mine. I remembered different birthdays, different holidays, different faces around the dinner table. The police said we should be prepared for the possibility that our child might not want to be found, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. They said sometimes people disappear because they want to start over. I stared at a photo of myself or this other person graduating from high school. I remembered my own graduation clearly, but the ceremony in the photo took place in a building I'd never seen, with people I didn't recognize. She pulled out a medical file next. Childhood injuries, vaccinations, even dental records. Every scar, every mark on my body was documented there. According to these records, I'd broken my arm at age 8 falling from a tree. I touched my left forearm instinctively, feeling the slight ridge where the bone had healed. I'd always been told that injury happened during a bicycle accident. There's something else, she said, reaching into her purse. She pulled out a small recording device. This was found in their room after they disappeared. The police gave it back to us when they closed the case. The voice that emerged from the tiny speaker was mine, unmistakably, undeniably mine. But I was saying words I'd never spoken, describing fears I'd never had, talking about plans I'd never made. The recording was fragmented, cutting in and out, but certain phrases were clear. I can't keep living this lie, and they'll never understand, and I have to become someone else. I left the coffee shop with copies of everything she'd shown me. That night, I spread the documents across my kitchen table and tried to make sense of the contradictions. 2 different lives, 2 different sets of memories, but only one body, one face, one scar above the left eyebrow. I found a business card in my wallet that I didn't remember putting there. The name was embossed in simple black letters with a phone number I didn't recognize. When I called, a woman answered immediately, as if she'd been waiting for my call. I was wondering when you'd reach out, she said. How much do you remember? I don't understand. The process isn't perfect. Sometimes fragments surface. Sometimes the old identity tries to reassert itself. The line went quiet except for the sound of her breathing. I could hear papers shuffling in the background. Who am I asked. You're exactly who you've always been. The question is, who do you want to remain? She hung up before I could respond. I tried calling back, but the number was disconnected. I still have the missing persons file. I keep it in a drawer next to my own identification documents. Sometimes I take them out and compare them, looking for some detail that might explain the discrepancy. But every examination only deepens the mystery. The passport application sits unfinished on my desk. I'm not sure which name to use anymore, or if either name is really mine. The clerk at the county office never called back about my identity verification. The missing person's family sends me letters occasionally, asking if I've remembered anything new. I haven't responded to their letters. I'm not sure what I would say. Some nights I dream about places I've never been, conversations I've never had, people whose faces feel familiar but whose names I can't recall. I wake up with the taste of unfamiliar food in my mouth, the scent of a perfume I don't wear clinging to my clothes. The scar above my eyebrow aches sometimes, especially when it rains. I find myself touching it absently, wondering if it's trying to tell me something I'm not ready to hear. I still don't know who I really am, but I'm beginning to suspect that the truth might be more complicated than simply choosing between two identities. Maybe the real question isn't who I am, but how many people I've been and how many of those lives I've forgotten. The recording device sits on my nightstand now. Sometimes I play it back, listening to my voice describe a life I don't remember living. But lately, some of those fragments have started to feel less foreign, less impossible. Maybe memory isn't as reliable as we think. Maybe identity is more fluid than we want to believe. Or maybe some truths are too difficult to accept, so we create new stories to live with. I still haven't decided whether to pursue the passport. Part of me wonders if I have the right to cross borders when I'm not entirely sure which country I'm really from. The missing persons case remains officially open. Somewhere in a file cabinet, there's a folder with my face on it, waiting for resolution. But I'm not sure resolution is what any of us really want. Some mysteries are more comfortable left unsolved. Crime 6, I kept hearing things, nothing dramatic, just faint movement like insulation settling. Then food started disappearing. Small things at first, crackers, canned beans, protein bars. I blamed myself until I found a handprint inside the air vent in my bedroom. Too big for a child, too small for mine. I unscrewed the panel and found a space behind the wall just wide enough for someone to crawl through. Blankets, wrappers, a flashlight, but the scariest part. A notebook filled with notes about me, my schedule, my moods, my passwords, and the last page said, "Almost ready." The handwriting was careful, deliberate, each letter formed with the precision of someone who had nothing but patience. I traced the edges of the notebook with trembling fingers, the paper slightly damp from the humidity trapped between the walls. The smell hit me then, something stale and human, mixed with the metallic scent of old pipes and dust. I should have called the police immediately. Instead, I sat there on my bedroom floor, reading page after page of my own life written in a stranger's hand. They knew when I left for work, when I came home, what I ate for dinner. They knew about the prescription bottles in my bathroom cabinet and the way I always checked the front door twice before bed. The most disturbing entries were the emotional observations. Seemed anxious today, kept looking over shoulder. Laughed at something on phone, genuine, not forced. Cried during movie, vulnerabilities noted. Someone had been cataloging my humanity like a scientist studying a specimen. I flipped through the pages, each one more invasive than the last. My banking information was there, copied from statements I thought I'd thrown away. Photos of my ID, my social security card, my birth certificate, all taken with what must have been a small camera. But how long had this been going on? The earliest entries were dated months ago, back when I first moved into this house. My hands shook as I reached the final entries. The handwriting became more urgent, less controlled, getting impatient. Time to move forward. Subject trusts too easily. And then that final line that made my blood freeze, almost ready. I crawled deeper into the space behind the wall, following the narrow passage with my phone's flashlight. The air was thick and suffocating, but I needed to see how far this went. The passage opened into a larger cavity above the kitchen, then continued toward the living room. Whoever had been here had created an entire network through my walls, complete with makeshift furniture and supplies. In what appeared to be their main living space, I found more notebooks, dozens of them, all filled with observations about previous occupants of this house. The family who lived here before me, the couple before them, going back years, maybe decades. Each notebook was labeled with dates and what I assumed were initials rather than names. The most recent notebook about the previous family ended abruptly with the notation, "Departed unexpectedly, opportunity lost." I remembered the real estate agent mentioning that the previous owners had left suddenly, something about a family emergency. But reading these entries, I wondered if they had discovered what I had just found. I heard a sound from somewhere in the house, a door closing softly. My entire body went cold. I hadn't locked the front door when I came home. I never locked it during the day. According to the notebooks, my observer knew this. Moving as quietly as possible, I crawled back toward my bedroom, clutching the newest notebook. I could hear movement downstairs now, familiar with the layout as if they belonged here. Footsteps moved from the kitchen to the living room, then toward the stairs. They were coming up. I slipped out of the wall space and quietly replaced the vent cover, then hid in my closet with the notebook pressed against my chest. The footsteps reached the top of the stairs, paused, then continued down the hallway. They stopped outside my bedroom door. The door opened with a soft creak. I held my breath, watching through the slats of the closet door as a figure moved around my room. They were average height, wearing dark clothing, moving with the confidence of someone who had done this many times before. They went directly to my dresser and began searching through my personal items with practiced efficiency. What struck me most was how normal they looked. Not the monster I had imagined, but someone unremarkable, someone who could blend into any crowd. They could have been anyone, a neighbor, a delivery person, someone I passed on the street every day without a second thought. After what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, they left. I waited until I heard the front door close before emerging from my hiding place. I rushed to the window and saw them walking down the street, hands in pockets, completely casual. They turned at the corner and disappeared. I called the police then, but explaining the situation proved more difficult than I expected. The responding officers were thorough but seemed skeptical. They documented the space behind the walls, took photos of the notebooks, and promised to investigate. But I could see the doubt in their eyes. The notebooks could have been planted. The handwriting could have been forged. Even the living space could have been staged. The detective assigned to the case was more understanding, but the investigation stalled quickly. No fingerprints were found that didn't belong to me or the previous residents. The notebooks contained no DNA evidence. The handwriting analysis was inconclusive. Without being able to identify the intruder, there was little they could do besides increase patrols in the neighborhood. I moved out within the week, staying with friends while I searched for a new place. But even in my temporary housing, I found myself checking vents and listening for sounds that shouldn't be there. The notebooks had revealed something that went far beyond a simple break-in or stalking case. This was systematic, methodical, and had been going on for much longer than just my occupancy. The most disturbing realization came when I was packing my belongings. I found a small hole drilled through the wall behind my headboard, perfectly positioned to observe the bed. It was old, painted over multiple times, suggesting it had been there since the house was built. This wasn't just about me or even the recent residents. Someone had been watching the occupants of this house for years, possibly decades. I tried to research the property's history, but the records were incomplete. The house had changed hands frequently, always sold quickly and often below market value. Previous owners were difficult to track down, and those I did manage to contact were reluctant to discuss their experiences. One former resident would only say that they had to leave for personal reasons before hanging up. The detective eventually closed the case due to lack of evidence, but I continued my own investigation. I discovered that similar incidents had been reported in houses throughout the area, always with the same pattern. Sounds in the walls, missing food, and residents who eventually moved away suddenly. But no one had ever found the kind of evidence I had discovered. I started to wonder if I was the first person to actually find the living space, or if others had found it and chosen to stay quiet. The notebooks suggested that the observer had been doing this for a very long time, perfecting their methods, learning from mistakes. They had become an expert at remaining invisible. The final entry in the notebook I took still haunts me, almost ready for what? To make contact, to escalate, to harm someone I never found out because I never saw them again. But sometimes in my new home, I still find myself listening for sounds that don't belong, checking vents and looking for signs that someone else might be watching. The case remains officially unsolved, but I know the truth. Someone had been living in my walls, studying me, preparing for something I can't even imagine. And somewhere out there, they might still be watching, waiting for the next opportunity, the next house, the next unsuspecting resident to catalog and observe. The most terrifying part isn't what they did, it's what they were planning to do next. Crime 7, at first I thought they were just kids' carvings, shapes etched into tree trunks, but they weren't random. Triangles, circles, jagged lines. Some trees had ropes hanging from them like swings, but tied in knots too complex for children. I followed the markings deeper into the forest. That's when I found a clearing with burned grass and a circle of stones, each painted with what looked like blood. In the center was a wooden stake with a single item nailed to it, a photograph of my front door. And behind it, footprints, fresh, leading toward my house. The photograph was mine. I recognized the crack in the green paint, the dent in the mailbox that I'd been meaning to fix for months, but I hadn't taken this picture. Someone else had stood in my driveway, camera in hand, capturing my home like evidence. The paper felt damp between my fingers, edges curling from humidity or something else I didn't want to consider. I stuffed the photograph into my jacket pocket and followed the footprints back through the trees. They led to my property line, then disappeared into the gravel of my driveway. Whoever had been here knew exactly where I lived. They'd been watching. That night I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the house settling made me sit up straight, listening. The woods behind my property had always been quiet, peaceful even. Now they felt like they were holding their breath, waiting for something to happen. The next morning I decided to investigate properly. I grabbed a notebook and went back to the clearing. In daylight the scene looked different but no less disturbing. The burned grass formed a perfect circle, as if someone had poured accelerant and lit it carefully. The stones weren't random rocks, they were uniform in size, deliberately chosen. And the red paint, or whatever it was, hadn't faded despite what looked like recent rain. I sketched the symbols carved into the surrounding trees. Some appeared fresh, bark still pale where knives had cut deep. Others looked older, weathered by seasons of exposure. This had been going on for a while. Someone had been using these woods regularly, and I'd never noticed. Walking the perimeter of the clearing, I found more evidence. Cigarette butts, but not the kind you'd buy at a convenience store. These were hand-rolled, expensive tobacco that left a distinct smell in the air. Empty bottles buried under leaves, labels too faded to read. And tucked behind a fallen log, a plastic bag containing what looked like receipts and notes. My hands shook as I opened the bag. The receipts were for camera equipment, rope, paint, all purchased within the last month. The notes were harder to decipher, handwriting that looked deliberately disguised, words that seemed to reference dates and locations. One phrase appeared repeatedly, Phase 2 implementation. I photographed everything with my phone, then carefully returned the items to their hiding spot. Whoever had left these things might come back, and I didn't want them to know I'd found their cache. Back home, I studied the photographs I'd taken. The symbols bothered me most. They weren't random doodles or teenage rebellion. They followed a pattern, a system that suggested planning and purpose. I spent hours online, searching for similar markings, trying to understand what I'd stumbled across. The search results made my stomach turn. Ritual markings, stalking preparation, territory marking by organized groups. Every explanation I found pointed to something deliberate and potentially dangerous. I called the local police, but their response was predictable. Without evidence of actual crime, they couldn't do much. The woods were on my property, technically, but they bordered public land. Anyone could access them. The symbols could be anything: art project, prank, coincidence. The officer who took my report was polite but dismissive. He suggested I install security cameras and keep doors locked. Standard advice for standard concerns. He didn't understand that this felt personal, targeted. That evening I heard voices in the woods, quiet conversation, too distant to make out words, but definitely human. I grabbed a flashlight and moved to my back window. Through the trees, I could see the faint glow of what might have been a campfire or lantern. Part of me wanted to call the police again, but I knew they wouldn't arrive in time to find anything. Instead, I watched and listened. The voices continued for what felt like hours, sometimes rising in what sounded like argument, sometimes falling to whispers. When silence finally returned, I crept outside. The smell of smoke lingered in the air, but the woods appeared empty. In the clearing, I found fresh disturbances. The circle of stones had been rearranged, new symbols carved into trees, and in the center, where the photograph had been nailed, someone had left a different item. It was a key, old brass with intricate teeth that suggested it belonged to something important. No tag, no identifying marks, just a key that someone wanted me to find. I held it up to my flashlight beam, studying its worn surface. This wasn't random. Everything about this situation was carefully orchestrated. Someone was communicating with me, leaving clues or warnings or invitations, but for what purpose? The key felt warm in my palm, as if it had been recently handled. I looked around the clearing one more time, suddenly aware of how exposed I was. The trees seemed to press closer, shadows deeper than they should be. I pocketed the key and hurried back to my house. Inside, I deadbolted the door and checked every window. The key sat on my kitchen table, innocuous but somehow threatening. What was it supposed to open, and why had someone left it for me to find? I called in sick to work the next day and spent the morning researching the key online. Old brass keys weren't uncommon, but this one had distinctive markings that might help identify its origin. After hours of searching, I found a match. It belonged to a type of lock used in older homes, specifically basement doors or storm cellars. My house was built in the 1950s, but I'd never found any locked doors that I couldn't open. I walked through every room, testing the key on anything that might fit. Nothing. Then I remembered the previous owner, an elderly woman who'd lived here for decades before moving to assisted living. She'd mentioned something about storage areas, spaces she'd sealed off because she no longer needed them. I'd assumed she meant closets or attics, but what if there was something else? I called the real estate agent who'd handled the sale. After some persuasion, she agreed to ask the former owner about any locked spaces in the house. The callback came within an hour. There was a root cellar accessible from the basement. The entrance had been paneled over years ago, but the lock remained behind the false wall. The elderly woman had kept the key but forgotten to mention it during the sale. I found the panel in my basement, hidden behind a shelf of old paint cans. The key fit perfectly. Behind the panel was a narrow wooden door, unlocked now, opening onto stone steps that led down into darkness. I descended carefully, flashlight beam dancing across rough stone walls. The root cellar was small, maybe 8 feet square, with wooden shelves along the walls. Most were empty, but one held a collection of items that made my breath catch. Photographs, dozens of them, all of my house, some taken from the woods, others from the street, a few from what looked like inside my yard. They spanned months, maybe longer. Someone had been documenting my home, my routines, my life. Beneath the photographs were notebooks filled with observations. What time I left for work, when I turned lights on and off, whether I had visitors. The handwriting was careful, methodical. This was surveillance, not casual interest. The final shelf held items I recognized from the clearing. Extra rope, paint, carving tools. This cellar had been used as a storage site for whoever was marking the woods, but how had they known about it, and why had they left the key for me to find? I photographed everything, then climbed back upstairs. The elderly woman who'd sold me the house couldn't have known about this. She'd been in assisted living for months before the sale, and these observations were recent. Someone else had discovered the cellar, used it, then decided to reveal it to me. The question was why? Why show me their surveillance? Why leave evidence of their activities? It felt like a game, but I couldn't understand the rules or the objective. That night I sat in my living room with all the lights on, thinking about what I'd found. The photographs showed my house at different times of day, different seasons. Whoever was watching me had been patient, thorough. They knew my habits better than I did. I checked my phone and found a new message from an unknown number. No words, just a photograph. It was me, taken through my living room window, sitting exactly where I was now. The timestamp showed it had been sent seconds ago. I jumped up and ran to the window, but the woods were dark and still. My hands shook as I closed the blinds and checked the door locks again. They were watching me right now, had been watching me discover their surveillance operation, probably found it amusing. The game had changed. Whatever this was, it was no longer just about marked trees and mysterious clearings. Someone had been studying me, learning my patterns, and now they wanted me to know it. The question was whether they planned to stay hidden or reveal themselves completely. I spent the rest of the night awake, listening to every sound, wondering if the footsteps I'd found in the woods were already circling back toward my house. The photograph on my phone proved they were still out there, still watching. But now I was watching back, and something told me that was exactly what they wanted. Primate, it was just another job. A storage unit cleared out by an eviction. Boxes, furniture, garbage, but one wardrobe was bolted to the floor. When I moved it, I found a hatch with a rope handle. Curiosity won. I opened it and found a ladder descending into darkness. What I discovered below wasn't storage. It was a room lined with soundproof padding. In the center, a camera stand, chains bolted into concrete, and a table with detailed records of people, photos, names, behaviors. I heard a noise above. When I climbed out, the wardrobe had been moved back into place. The smell hit me first when I returned the next day. Not decay, but something sterile mixed with fear, like a hospital room where something terrible had happened. I convinced myself it was just cleaning chemicals from previous tenants, but my hands were already shaking as I turned the key. The storage facility manager had been oddly specific about this unit. Clean everything, he said, but don't ask questions about what you find. The previous tenant had vanished without paying rent for 3 months. No forwarding address, no contact information, just boxes of what looked like a normal life abandoned. I started with the obvious things: clothes that still smelled like someone's perfume, kitchen appliances that had been used recently, a coffee maker with grounds still in the filter. But as I worked deeper into the unit, the normalcy began to crack. Hidden behind winter coats, I found folders filled with newspaper clippings, missing persons reports from different regions, all young people, all with similar physical descriptions. The photographs were what made my stomach turn, not the professional headshots you'd expect from a portfolio, but candid shots taken from a distance. People walking to their cars, entering buildings, sitting in cafes. Some were taken through windows. Each photo had a date written on the back and a number. The numbers went up to 47. I should have called someone then, but the folders were organized so meticulously, so deliberately, that I needed to understand what I was looking at. The handwriting was careful, almost beautiful. Each file contained detailed observations about habits, schedules, relationships, who they lived with, where they worked, what time they left home each morning. The wardrobe shouldn't have been so heavy. When I tried to move it, I realized it was bolted to the concrete floor. The bolts were new, recently installed. Someone had gone to considerable effort to make sure this piece of furniture stayed exactly where it was. That's when I noticed the scratches on the floor around it, as if it had been moved repeatedly. The hatch underneath was professional grade, not something you'd find at a hardware store. The rope handle was worn smooth from use. My flashlight beam disappeared into the darkness below, but I could make out the top rungs of a ladder. The air that rose from below was cold and carried that same sterile smell, stronger now. I descended one rung at a time, my phone's flashlight cutting through the darkness. The room below was larger than the storage unit above. The walls were covered in thick foam padding, the kind used in recording studios, but this wasn't for music. In the center of the room, chains were embedded in the concrete floor, professional restraints, not something improvised. The camera stand was high-end equipment, positioned to capture everything from multiple angles. The table held more files. These were different from the ones upstairs. These had completion dates stamped on them. The handwriting became more erratic in the later entries, as if whoever was writing them was becoming less careful about documentation. The final entry was dated just weeks before the tenant disappeared. I photographed everything with my phone before I heard the sound above. Not footsteps exactly, but the scraping of furniture being moved. When I climbed back up, breathing hard, the wardrobe had been shifted back into place. The hatch was hidden again. Someone had been watching me. The storage facility's security cameras had been disabled for maintenance that week. The manager mentioned it casually when I asked, as if it was perfectly normal timing. He seemed nervous when I pressed for details about the previous tenant. Just paid in cash, he said. Always alone, never caused problems until he stopped paying entirely. I tried to trace the missing persons reports I'd found. Half of them were from jurisdictions that claimed they'd never issued such reports. The other half led to dead ends, phone numbers that were disconnected, police departments that had no record of the cases. Someone had been very careful about covering their tracks. The photographs I'd taken in the underground room came out strangely distorted. The angles were wrong somehow, as if the camera had been shaking even though I was sure my hands were steady. The files were mostly illegible, the handwriting blurred beyond recognition. Only the dates remained clear, stretching back over several years. I returned to the storage unit one final time. The wardrobe was gone. The hatch was gone. The concrete floor was smooth and unmarked, as if nothing had ever been there. The manager claimed he'd never seen a wardrobe in that unit. The previous tenant had only left boxes of personal items, nothing more. But I still have the photographs I took upstairs, the missing persons reports, the surveillance photos of people who might still be alive somewhere or might not be, the handwriting that documented someone's careful plans with beautiful precision. The authorities I contacted seemed more interested in how I'd obtain the materials than in investigating what they might mean. The storage facility closed permanently a month later. The manager disappeared around the same time. The building was demolished to make way for a shopping complex. Whatever evidence might have remained was buried under concrete and steel. I still clean storage units for a living, but now I pay attention to details that other people might miss. The way a previous tenant organized their belongings, the smell of fear that lingers even after someone is gone, the difference between abandonment and disappearance. Sometimes I wonder if I'm the only one who remembers what was hidden beneath that wardrobe, or if someone else is still watching, still planning, still documenting with that same careful handwriting. Crime 9, it was an antique piece, heavy, tarnished, with strange symbols carved into the frame. I placed it in the hallway, but every time I passed by, something looked wrong. The reflection wasn't matching the room. At first I thought it was lag, distortion, something with the glass, but then I saw people in it, moving silently in the reflection. Children running, a woman crying, a man screaming. None of them were in the actual hallway, just the mirror. Then one day the scene changed to something more recent. Me, asleep in bed, and a figure standing over me. That's when I knew I had to dig deeper into the house's history. The previous owner had left behind boxes in the basement, documents scattered like confessions waiting to be read. I found insurance papers first, then medical records, then something that made my hands shake as I held it, a police report filed but never pursued. The family that lived here before me had 3 children, 2 girls and a boy. The report mentioned domestic disturbances, but the language was careful, sanitized. Neighbors had called multiple times about screaming, about sounds that didn't belong in a suburban home. But each time the officers arrived, everything appeared normal. The mother would answer the door with fresh makeup covering what looked like shadows under her eyes. The father would offer coffee and explanations about rough play, about children being children. I started visiting the neighbors, asking casual questions about the previous residents. The elderly woman next door remembered the family well. She spoke in whispers, glancing toward my house as if the walls might hear her. She told me about the late-night sounds, the way the children would sometimes appear at her kitchen window just staring. She mentioned how the youngest girl had drawn pictures of the bad man at school, but when teachers asked who the bad man was, she would only point toward home. The mirror kept showing me scenes I couldn't explain. I began documenting what I saw, writing down every detail, every face, every gesture. The woman crying wasn't just sad, she was terrified. The man screaming wasn't angry, he was desperate. And the children running weren't playing, they were fleeing. I found more documents in the basement. Hidden between old tax returns was a journal, pages filled with careful handwriting that grew more erratic as the entries progressed. The mother had been keeping records of her husband's behavior, documenting incidents she was too afraid to report. The entries spoke of threats, of violence that escalated when the children tried to protect her. She wrote about feeling trapped, about fearing for her life and the lives of her children. The journal's final entry was different. It wasn't about violence or fear. It was about a plan. She had decided to leave, to take the children and disappear. She had saved money, made arrangements, chosen a date, but the journal ended there, mid-sentence, as if she had been interrupted while writing. I contacted the police department, asking about the family. The officer who handled their case had retired, but I managed to reach him. His voice grew heavy when I mentioned the address. He told me about the father's connections, about how certain people in positions of power had made it clear that the family's complaints weren't to be taken seriously. He said there were rumors about what the father did for work, about the kind of people who protected him. The mirror showed me something new that changed everything. I saw myself in the reflection, but not as I was in the present. I was standing in the same hallway, but the walls were different, the lighting dimmer. I was holding something, a photograph. As I watched my reflection, I saw myself turn the photograph around, and I could see what it showed. The family that had lived here before me, all four of them, smiling at the camera. But they weren't alone in the photograph. In the background, barely visible, was another figure. Someone who shouldn't have been there, someone whose presence made the family's smiles look forced, strained. I realized I had seen this person before, in the mirror's other visions, always lurking at the edges, always watching. I searched the basement again, more carefully this time. Behind a loose board, I found more photographs, dozens of them. They showed the family in various situations, but always with that same figure in the background. Some photos were taken from inside the house, as if someone had been living there without the family's knowledge. Others were taken from outside, through windows, capturing intimate moments that should have been private. The neighbor woman called me, her voice shaking. She said she had remembered something else, something she had tried to forget. She had seen the father burning papers in the backyard, but it wasn't just papers. There were photographs, documents, and something else she couldn't quite make out. She said the fire had a strange smell, not like burning wood or paper, but something organic, something that had made her feel sick. I went to the police with everything I had found. The detective who took my statement was professional but skeptical. He explained that the family had moved away, that there was no current investigation, that the old reports had been closed. But when I showed him the photographs, his expression changed. He recognized the figure in the background, knew the face from other cases, other disappearances. The detective told me about a pattern they had been tracking, about families who had reported similar experiences before vanishing completely. He said they had suspected someone was using abandoned or recently sold houses as bases of operation, but they had never been able to prove it. The photographs I had found might be the evidence they needed. But when we returned to my house to collect more evidence, the basement was empty. The boxes were gone, the loose board had been repaired, and the mirror in the hallway showed only normal reflections. The detective searched thoroughly, but found nothing. No trace of the documents, no sign that anything had ever been hidden there. I still live in the house, but nothing feels the same. Sometimes I catch glimpses of movement in my peripheral vision, shadows that don't belong to anything in the room. I've installed cameras, changed the locks, but the feeling of being watched never goes away. The mirror shows normal reflections now, but I can't shake the feeling that something is still here, still waiting. The case remains open, but without the evidence, there's little the police can do. The family that lived here before me was never found. The man in the photographs was never identified. And sometimes, when I'm alone in the house, I wonder if I'm documenting my own story now, if someone else is watching, waiting, planning. The mirror doesn't show the past anymore, but sometimes in the corner of my eye, I think I see what it might show in the future. Story 10. The motel stood solitary, a relic of bygone days where transient souls sought refuge for a fleeting night. The receptionist, with a cryptic gaze, handed her the key, a silent warning lingering in the air. Just remember, avoid the last door on the left, his words barely audible. Intrigue tugged at her curiosity. That evening, navigating the shadowed corridor, she halted before the ominous door. The brass knob chilled her hand. To the naked eye, it blended with its peers until she pressed her ear to its surface. From within, a soft breath whispered, Detective Morgan Reed awoke from her slumber, entering the crime scene with a heavy heart. The scent assaulted her senses, first coppery and rancid, a familiar odor of tragedy. Blood had tainted the threadbare carpet, melding with its intricate design into a somber hue. The room was a paradox, pristine lavatory, untouched bedding, and amidst them the grim tableau. A young woman lay sprawled on the floor, her golden locks splayed like a halo. Her vacant gaze fixed upon the ceiling, frozen in a silent scream. Reed knelt beside the victim, mindful of the evidence markers scattered around. Third one this season, the forensic expert remarked, his tone devoid of emotion as he documented the scene. The same modus operandi as before, Reed nodded solemnly. The victim adorned in finery out of place in this forsaken inn. A designer purse lay open on the nightstand, contents undisturbed. This was not a crime of theft. There was a deeper motive guiding this malevolent hand. Hotel manager lingered anxiously at the threshold, his pallor ashen. She checked in alone, paid in cash. I never imagined, his voice faltered. The maid discovered her during the cleaning. Reed scrutinized the room anew. No signs of forced entry, no defensive wounds on the victim. She had either welcomed her assailant or known them intimately. Back at headquarters, Reed pinned up photos on the board. 3 women, strikingly similar, all found in obscure motels. Speculations arose in the media. Whispers of a serial predator haunting the community. The autopsy findings are in, Detective Hayes announced, dropping a file on Reed's desk. Cause of death, manual strangulation, no DNA under the victim's nails, no indications of sexual assault. Reed furrowed her brow. This was personal, not driven by primal urges. Days melded into nights as the investigation deepened. Surveillance footage from the motel revealed nothing of significance. The victim, identified as Elaine Werner, a meticulous financial analyst with no known adversaries. Her acquaintances described her as cautious, detail-oriented. A puzzle piece fell into place during Reed's interview with Werner's sister. She mentioned a man she was involved with, the sister disclosed, hands trembling around her cup. A colleague from work. She was secretive about it, said he was complicated, possibly married. Reed leaned in. Did she mention a name? Only referred to him as C, that's all she divulged. The focus shifted to Werner's workplace. Colleagues painted her as reserved, dedicated. None were privy to her personal affairs. Yet a breakthrough came when Reed uncovered a business card tucked within Werner's desk calendar. Charles Emerson, Senior Vice President. Emerson exuded charm and composure when interrogated, concerned, cooperative, keeping a safe distance. His alibi appeared airtight, dining with his spouse and another couple. However, a flicker in his gaze unsettled Reed. Did you have a personal relationship with Elaine Werner outside of work? Reed inquired casually. A fleeting shadow crossed Emerson's features, imperceptible to most. Strictly professional. Later that week, partial fingerprints from Werner's purse linked back to Emerson. When confronted, his facade crumbled. We were involved, he confessed, but I terminated our association. She threatened to expose me to my wife. Was that reason enough to end her life? Reed probed. Emerson's demeanor hardened. I never set foot in that motel, yet records from the inn painted a contradictory narrative. A credit card transaction for the neighboring room paid with a corporate card linked to Emerson's firm. A hidden camera was unearthed in that room, capturing incriminating footage. Fibers from Emerson's attire matched those found on Werner's body. His DNA lingered on a water glass in her quarters. Examination of his personal computer unveiled recordings of the previous victims. A pattern emerged. Emerson selected women resembling his spouse in her youth, coercing them to rendezvous at specific motels, always choosing the room adjacent to the last door on the left, a chamber prepped with surveillance gear. He recorded their encounters, then returned to erase the evidence, the women themselves. In the interrogation chamber, Emerson's facade finally crumbled. They were a threat to everything, he whispered. My career, my marriage, my existence. The trial was swift but gripping. 3 families witnessed justice unfold in the sterile courtroom. Emerson remained stoic, devoid of remorse, the same mask he wore in the corporate realm. The judge sentenced him to life imprisonment. As officers led him away, Reed locked eyes with him. For a fleeting moment, she glimpsed a void behind his facade, not compassion, but its absence. A hollow space where empathy should have dwelled. The media dubbed it the door on the left saga. Psychologists delved into Emerson's psyche. True crime enthusiasts dissected every detail. However, for Reed, the case remained unclosed. Sometimes, wandering down motel corridors, she found herself numbering doors, pondering the enigmas concealed within. In the evidence vault, 3 identical motel keys lay preserved, a tangible reminder that certain doors, once opened, could never be shut again. Story 11, The House's Hidden Watcher. Realtor's listing made no mention of a basement. The blueprints held no clues to its existence. Yet when the family peeled back the worn carpet, a door emerged, concealed beneath. A hefty, rusted handle beckoned. It required the strength of 3 to pry it open. Stale air, heavy with the aroma of damp soil, billowed out to meet them. Steps descended into the darkness below. They anticipated a storage space. Instead, they encountered a solitary chair, a solitary light bulb swaying gently above it. And on the wall behind, a series of photographs of them. The Mercer family had settled into the suburban abode during the chill of winter, when shadows lingered long and the skeletal trees of the neighborhood stood stark against the frigid sky. They had seen charm in the 2-story structure with its weathered siding and creaking floorboards. Character and history, they had murmured to themselves. Yet, the depth of history lurking within the house and the forceful collision it would have with their present had eluded their foresight. Detective Sarah Connors arrived at the scene with her partner, the crime scene unit already cordoning off the area with fluttering yellow tape. Mrs. Mercer's quivering voice had relayed the unsettling discovery beneath their very living room floor. We must document everything before anyone else ventures down there, Connors directed, pulling on latex gloves with practiced ease. Camera flashes pierced the darkness, illuminating the stairwell in sporadic bursts as the forensic team captured the scene. The wooden steps groaned underfoot. The basement, a modest space akin to a standard bedroom, boasted concrete walls painted a somber gray. The solitary chair was anchored to the floor at the room's heart. Above it, the bare bulb cast stark shadows that danced across the room, stirred by an unseen breath. However, it was the sequence of photographs that seized attention. 37 images in total, meticulously arranged in a chronological sequence. These extend back nearly 4 weeks, Connor's partner remarked, scrutinizing the timestamps inscribed on the reverse of the prints. See this one, Mrs. Mercer dozing on the sofa, Mr. Mercer at the dining table, the children in their chambers. The inquiry uncovered no signs of forced entry, no shattered windows or tampered locks. The security system had never been activated. Nothing had been pilfered. Only their privacy had been violated. Alongside any semblance of security the family might have harbored. Forensic scrutiny unearthed numerous fingerprints throughout the basement, predominantly belonging to previous proprietors of the residence. Records disclosed that the house had changed hands 6 times in the preceding decade, each family departing within a year, vending at diminishing prices. Not one had divulged the discovery of a basement. We must converse with every previous owner, Connors instructed, flicking through her notepad. The case grew increasingly disquieting as they retraced the property's history. Discrepancies in the records emerged, blueprints altered between sales, permits submitted then retracted, inspection reports heavily censored. A breakthrough surfaced upon interviewing the contractor who had revamped the house 7 years prior. His countenance drained of color when confronted with photographs of the basement. "That chamber is non-existent," he asserted, his hands quivering. "I stripped that place down to its foundation. There was no basement, no door, naught beneath the living room save earth and concrete. Data extracted from the memory card secreted within the light fixture unveiled hundreds more images adorning their evidence boards, not only of the Mercers, but of preceding families. Offspring slumbering, parents embroiled in disputes, intimate instants, mundane rituals, all captured by an intruder who had no right to be there. The narrative assumed a graver hue upon unearthing audio files from a weatherproof container buried in the basement's recesses. Voice recordings of conversations held in the master bedroom, the kitchen, the living room. The caliber of sound hinted at sophisticated microphones concealed throughout the house, though none had been unearthed during the initial sweep. "We must dismantle every wall," Connors decreed, her tone taut with urgency. "Inspect the air vents, light fixtures, electrical outlets. The perpetrator has been surveilling these families for years." Beyond the photograph-laden wall, investigators stumbled upon a narrow passageway leading to a diminutive monitoring hub. A desk, a chair, a laptop connected to an array of wireless cameras, and a journal, its pages brimming with meticulous observations concerning each family that had dwelled in the house, their routines, their timetables, their disputes, their vulnerabilities. The script mirrored samples from the initial builder of the residence, a man named Edward Kelvin. Archives indicated he had perished during the house's construction, a detail that acquired suspicion as the investigation unfolded. No death certificate was on file, no funeral arrangements documented. Edward Kelvin had simply vanished from the public register. The final entries in the journal devolved into incoherence. Phrases like "they never glanced below" and "they never perceived me" recurred incessantly. The ultimate page bore a solitary sentence: "The succeeding family arrives tomorrow." Analysis of fingerprints corroborated what the detectives had begun to surmise: Edward Kelvin had never vacated the house he erected. He had merely receded into its concealed recesses, forging a labyrinth of vantage points from which to observe the families who assumed they dwelt in solitude. The manhunt spanned 3 days. They discovered him curled within a crawl space amid the second-floor chambers, his physique lean and sinewy, adapted to navigating the narrow corridors he had fashioned within the walls. His eyes blinked against the glare of the flashlight beams, unaccustomed to direct illumination. During interrogation, Kelvin spoke of the families as though they were players in his private theater. He delineated his surveillance with the clinical detachment of a scientist scrutinizing specimens. He had never made physical contact, never thieved from them, never directly meddled in their lives. He had merely observed, recorded, documented. "They welcomed me in," he divulged to the investigators, his voice soft and rational. "They endorsed the contracts. They became mine." The psychological evaluation ascertained that Kelvin suffered severe delusions, deeming himself a custodian of the house rather than an intruder. The families were transient guests in what he perceived as his permanent abode. The Mercer family forsook the property, never to return. Like their predecessors, they deserted their possessions, salvaging only what they could transport in suitcases. The house lay vacant as the legal proceedings unfolded. The trial unveiled the true extent of Kelvin's surveillance grid, concealed chambers accessible solely via crawl spaces, surveillance points integrated into the edifice itself, all meticulously contrived before the inaugural brick was laid. The house had been devised from inception as an observation apparatus, its tenants unwitting participants in Kelvin's obsessive documentation. Upon the jury's verdict, Kelvin evinced no reaction. He had already retreated into the recesses of his mind's architecture, where he could still glide unseen through the passages of the house that existed now solely in memory. The property was ultimately razed, its subterranean depths excavated and filled. Nonetheless, for the families who had dwelt within, the violation endured. They remained haunted not by what had been purloined from them, but by what they had never fathomed existed, watching, listening, recording their most intimate moments from within walls they had trusted to shield them. Occasionally, in moments of tranquility, they discovered themselves casting fleeting glances at air vents, light fixtures, the junctions where walls melded with ceilings, contemplating whether they were truly solitary now, pondering if they ever had been. Story 12. In the quiet of the night, a phone call stirred the air, a mere pocket dial, filled with static and muffled whispers. The operator was ready to dismiss it as a trivial mishap until a voice, faint but urgent, broke through the chaos. A woman's voice, trembling with fear, whispered, "He's here." And then an eerie silence descended, swallowing the words whole. The trail led to an empty house, a relic of a forgotten past, abandoned and shrouded in mystery for years. No signs of intrusion, no disturbances in the stillness of the night. Yet in the dimly lit kitchen, a beacon of light amidst the darkness, the phone rested on the counter, its screen glowing softly. The call had been made mere moments ago, a ghostly echo in the empty spaces. Detective Morgan Reed, haunted by the enigmatic whisper, played back the recording once more, searching for answers in the ethereal voice that lingered in the air, desperate, terrified, and utterly impossible. This abandoned abode had once belonged to the Sullivan family, who had fled after a devastating fire consumed a part of their home. A place frozen in time, untouched by human hands since their departure. The phone, a relic of the past, belonged to Catherine Sullivan, the daughter who had met a tragic end in a car accident 3 years prior. A perplexing puzzle unfolded before Morgan and her partner, Detective Walsh, as they delved deeper into the shadows of this inexplicable mystery. A deceased woman's phone, ringing from the depths of an abandoned house, defying all logic and reason. The forensic team scoured the scene, seeking traces of the unseen, but the house yielded no secrets. No fingerprints graced the surface of the device, only elusive smudges that refused to reveal their origins. No footprints marked the path to or from the house, as if the caller had emerged from thin air. The doors remained locked, the windows sealed shut, guarding their silent secrets. The heart of the investigation lay in those fleeting moments of the call, 11 seconds of static, of labored breaths, and the haunting words that echoed through the void. Voice analysis confirmed the impossible. The voice on the other end belonged to Catherine Sullivan, with an eerie certainty of 98%. The timestamp bore a chilling truth. The call had occurred at the precise moment of Catherine's tragic demise, a ghostly echo from beyond the veil. Interviews with those who had known Catherine unveiled fragments of a shattered past. Her father, now remarried, bore the weight of confusion in his eyes. Her mother, a lone figure in a small apartment, crumbled at the sound of her daughter's voice whispering from the void. And Mark Jennings, Catherine's former lover, stood at the center of the storm, his alibi a fragile shield against the encroaching darkness. A revelation came in the form of a worn journal, unearthed from Catherine's belongings, a testament to a love turned sour, to a fear that lurked in the shadows. The pages spoke of a descent into madness, of control and isolation, of a final plea for help that went unanswered. "If anything happens to me, it wasn't an accident," the words cried out from the faded ink, a plea for justice from beyond the grave. Confronted with the damning evidence, Mark's facade crumbled, revealing a darkness that lurked beneath the surface. The truth, buried deep within the earth, resurfaced as ground-penetrating radar revealed a chilling secret: Catherine's true phone, buried 20 feet from the site of her supposed accident. Deleted text spoke of a sinister pursuit, of a life cut short by the hands of the one she once loved. The pieces fell into place, painting a portrait of betrayal and deceit. Mark's apartment, a shrine to his twisted obsession, bore witness to his crimes, a macabre collection of memories stolen from the dead. An audio manipulation software, a puppeteer's tool, had crafted the illusion of a ghostly call, a specter haunting the living with its phantom whispers. As the net closed around him, Mark's final confession echoed through the halls of justice. A desperate attempt to silence the voice that accused him, to shroud his crimes in a veil of spectral deception. But justice, relentless and unforgiving, found its mark in the end. The phone from the abandoned house now rests in the evidence locker, a silent sentinel of a tale untold. Officers whisper a phantom rings in the dead of night, a ghostly echo of a voice long gone. Catherine's story lives on, not as a ghostly legend, but as a testament to the resilience of the silenced, to the echoes that linger when all else fades away. Story 13. In a forgotten corner of time, a Polaroid aged with secrets held a chilling tale. Among the worn images of past birthdays, a subtle shift lurked unnoticed. A man, a mere whisper in the background, crept closer with each snapshot. Sarah Winters unearthed this unsettling collection while sorting through her mother's attic after the final farewell. The box, labeled Memories, contained a visual echo of bygone days, a silent witness to family gatherings long past. Yet what should have brought solace birthed a descent into darkness. The man, a spectral presence, materialized gradually in the photos, a phantom gatecrasher at celebrations frozen in time. His journey from the fringes to the heart of the frames mirrored a sinister progression. With trembling hands, Sarah reached out to her father, seeking answers to the enigma haunting the faded images. His denial only deepened the mystery, shrouding the truth in a veil of uncertainty. Detective Marcus Reed became a harbinger of clarity as Sarah laid bare the enigmatic photos on his desk, the patter of rain outside casting a cloak of melancholy over the scene. With a keen eye, Reed traced the phantom's spectral path through the gatherings, a spectral intruder encroaching upon innocence with each advancing picture. The shadowy figure, elusive yet persistent, defied identification, a ghostly enigma deftly avoiding capture by lens and memory alike. The revelation of the man's identity unfurled a macabre tapestry woven in shadows of the past. Dental records bridged the gap between the phantom and Robert Keller, a ghost from the annals of unsolved abductions. Keller's macabre legacy unfurled, linking him to a string of disappearances that had long eluded justice. The chilling truth emerged from beneath layers of deception, a sinister undercurrent threading through the fabric of family gatherings tainted by his unseen presence. Sarah's quiet vigil amid the revelations bore witness to the convergence of long-forgotten nightmares with the harsh light of accountability. The man in the shadows, a specter of malevolence, had skulked through the annals of time, leaving behind a trail of shattered families and unanswered questions. As the final piece of the puzzle fell into place, Sarah found herself adrift in a sea of revelations, grappling with the weight of truths long buried beneath layers of deceit. The man in the shadows, once a spectral enigma, now stood exposed in the harsh glare of justice, his legacy of terror unmasked by the relentless pursuit of truth. With a heavy heart, Sarah returned the damning evidence to its confines, a silent testament to the insidious nature of evil that lurks unseen in the shadows of memory, waiting to be unveiled in the unforgiving light of truth. Story 14. The calf had been his sanctuary for as long as anyone could remember, a place where time seemed to stand still, where routine was a comforting embrace. Each day, the man with no name would slip into the shadows of his usual corner, a silent observer in a sea of chatter and clinking cups. The barista, a silent confidant, recognized his face in the crowd, but the mystery of his name lingered like a whispered secret among the regulars. Then, one fateful day, he didn't come. His absence hung heavy in the air, a subtle shift in the fabric of the familiar. When the authorities ventured to his customary seat, they found a solitary wallet abandoned, a lone sentinel of his enigma. Inside, a driver's license bore a face without a name, an identity erased as if by unseen hands. Detective Sarah Mercer, with her sharp eyes and keen mind, sifted through the fragments of the man who had slipped through the cracks of existence. The security footage, a ghostly echo of his presence, offered no solace, only more questions veiled in shadows. The figure on the screen, dubbed John Doe in the annals of the case, moved with an eerie normalcy. He entered, he sat, he vanished. No trace, no explanation. Just an enigma suspended in the stillness of a coffee shop frozen in time. As Mercer delved deeper into the mystery, she encountered whispers of the impossible. The man who never spoke, who left no trace, seemed to defy the very laws of reality. His belongings, scattered like breadcrumbs of a ghostly trail, revealed nothing but more mysteries. A blank-faced wallet, cryptic codes in a forgotten notebook, and a business card that led to a void of silence. Each piece of the puzzle a tantalizing clue, yet the picture remained shrouded in darkness. The barista, a silent witness to the enigma, offered fleeting glimpses of the man who didn't exist. A phantom in the midst of the mundane, a cipher waiting to be deciphered. The mirror, an ancient relic cast in shadows of forgotten lore, held secrets deeper than its reflective surface. In its distorted gaze, Mercer glimpsed a world beyond, a realm where reality bled into the unknown. And as she peered into the abyss of the mirror's depths, she felt a warmth that was not of this world, a sensation that whispered of forgotten truths and hidden doorways. The revelation came in shards of glass, in fractured reflections of a man lost to time. Daniel Weston, the brilliant mind trapped in the liminal spaces between worlds, a ghost in the machine of existence. His experiments, his theories, his very essence etched in the fabric of the coffee shop's walls. A place where realities converged, where the boundaries between worlds blurred and bled into each other. And as Mercer stood amidst the ruins of shattered illusions, she knew that some mysteries were not meant to be unraveled, some truths not meant to be unveiled. The man who didn't exist slipped through her fingers like smoke, a phantom forever lost to the echoes of memory. The calf, a silent witness to the enigma, closed its doors, its secrets buried beneath the rubble of forgotten dreams. Daniel Weston, the man who slipped through the cracks of reality, faded into the shadows of legend, a ghost in the machine of time. And Detective Mercer, haunted by the echoes of a mystery unsolved, found solace in the whispers of the wind, in the dance of shadows on her porch. A fragment of an antique mirror hung on her wall, a portal to a world beyond, a reminder of the man who didn't exist, lost in the labyrinth of time. Story 15, The Last Mask. The quaint costume shop was in the process of closing down, its shelves now sparse as it cleared out old inventory. Among the remnants of forgotten disguises, a woman discovered a lone mask tucked away on a dusty shelf. Its delicate features held a disconcerting, lifelike quality that gave her pause. When she brought it to the cashier to purchase, a sense of unease crept over him. "That's not ours," he muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. Perplexed, she checked for a tag, but there was none to be found. With a nonchalant shrug, she decided to take the mysterious mask home. That very night, she awoke to a soft, almost imperceptible sound, a gentle whisper of fabric shifting. Her heart quickened as she realized the mask was no longer resting on the dresser where she had left it. Instead, it now sat ominously on her nightstand, its vacant gaze fixed directly upon her. The woman, known as Catherine Reed, was later discovered by her concerned neighbor. The front door of her home was left slightly ajar, allowing the morning light to spill into the darkness within. What awaited her neighbor inside was a scene so haunting it would linger in the minds of investigators for years to come. Catherine lay motionless on the cold bedroom floor, the eerie mask nowhere to be found. Detective Morgan arrived at the somber scene as forensics diligently captured every detail with their cameras. The rhythmic clicking of the shutters provided an eerie backdrop to the hushed whispers of the team. "Not a single sign of forced entry," noted one of the officers, his pen swiftly scribbling notes in his pad. The detective's keen eyes scanned the room, absorbing every detail with a thoughtful gaze. A slightly ajar drawer, a lipstick-stained water glass on the nightstand, everything seemed ordinary except for the lifeless figure of Catherine Reed. The medical examiner, with a solemn expression on his face, leaned over the body. Cause of death remains unclear upon initial inspection. "No visible wounds, no signs of a struggle," he stated. Gesturing towards her frozen expression of terror, he added, "Yet the fear in her eyes speaks volumes." As the investigation unfolded, a puzzling discovery emerged from the security footage of the costume shop. The cashier's genuine confusion over the mask raised suspicions. The owner, when consulted, denied ever stocking such an item. It was as if the mask had materialized out of thin air, a harbinger of dark omens. Upon further inquiry, the owner reluctantly divulged a chilling truth. The mask had surfaced during a clearance sale, its origins shrouded in mystery. Such occurrences were not uncommon, following the acquisition of items from the estate of a deceased collector with a shadowy past. A breakthrough in the case came when forensics unearthed microscopic fibers embedded in Catherine's fingertips. Examination revealed a peculiar mix of human hair and an unidentified organic substance, defying classification in any known database. The investigation took a sinister turn as records unveiled a pattern of similar deaths linked to the acquisition of enigmatic masks. Each victim bore an expression of sheer terror upon their demise, their deaths remaining unsolved mysteries. In a clandestine meeting, a retired detective shared a chilling revelation with Detective Morgan. Inside each mask, hidden behind the lining, were ancient symbols hinting at a ritual involving soul transference, a macabre tradition that spanned centuries. A breakthrough came from an unexpected source, Catherine's own journal, discovered concealed within her apartment. In her final entries, she chronicled a creeping sense of being watched, her research into the mask's origins, and its connection to a series of inexplicable deaths. "The mask moves," she had penned with escalating urgency. "It watches me, waiting for its next victim to claim. Each mask harbors a dark entity seeking a new host, a vessel to inhabit and consume." As the pieces of the puzzle fell into place, the cause of Catherine's demise was finally unveiled. Cardiac arrest induced by sheer terror, a fear so profound it had stopped her heart in its tracks. The investigation took a spine-chilling twist as surveillance footage from a neighboring property captured a figure exiting Catherine's home in the dead of night, cloaked in a mask that mirrored her features but moved with an unnatural, mechanical precision. Despite a citywide alert for the missing mask, it remained elusive until reports surfaced of a peculiar mask surfacing in a vintage shop across the country, sold to an unknown buyer before investigators could intervene. The enigmatic cycle of the mask continued, its dark legacy persisting through the ages. The detective, haunted by the unsolved case, safeguarded Catherine's journal, a testament to a truth too bizarre for official records. At night, a sense of unease would sometimes grip her, a feeling of being watched by unseen eyes. She would rise from her slumber, checking the locks on her windows and doors, silently dreading the day when the malevolent mask would find its next victim. The vessel of ancient evil lay dormant, biding its time until it would once again emerge, its empty gaze fixed upon a new soul, hungry for what lay beyond mortal sight. Story 16. The dwelling had sat abandoned for a span of years. Whispers from the neighbors suggested it had remained uninhabited since the mysterious disappearance of a young woman. Nevertheless, when the fresh occupants ventured inside, they encountered a locked bedroom. With effort, they forced the door ajar, revealing a room filled with stagnant air, laden with dust, but an unsettling presence lingered. The bed was impeccably made, the mirror gleaming without a speck. A solitary candle had melted to a mere stub, its wax frozen like tears of sorrow. And then they beheld it, the notebook, its pages open to one inscribed with ink that seemed freshly applied. The concluding entry bore the date of the night she vanished. Detective Morgan pored over the notebook's contents as forensic experts combed the room for clues. The meticulous script belonged to Elise Winters, aged 26, who had been reported missing by her parents nearly 5 years prior. Her elegant handwriting graced the pages with precision and grace until the final entry, where the pen had pressed forcefully, leaving imprints on subsequent blank sheets. "I know he's observing me this night," the concluding entry conveyed. "The same vehicle has passed thrice. I've sought help, but no one believes me. If something untoward occurs, know it was not by chance." The detective closed the tome, securing it in an evidence bag. A faint scent of dust mingled with an elusive chemical aroma permeated the room. The landlord lingered in the doorway, visage pallid, arms tightly crossed. "I swear we inspected every nook before offering it for rent," he murmured. "That door was never secured." Elise had been employed as a paralegal at Harriman and Associates, a renowned law firm embroiled in numerous high-profile cases. Colleagues depicted her as meticulous, devoted, yet increasingly withdrawn in the weeks leading up to her disappearance. She started working late hours, her supervisor recounted during an official interrogation. Mentioned stumbling upon discrepancies in the Westridge acquisition files, numbers altered, documents backdated. The detective scrutinized photographs of Elise auburn locks, earnest gaze framed by rectangular spectacles, perpetually attired in professional garb. The woman captured in those images appeared too calculated to simply vanish, too methodical to depart without a trace. The bedroom divulged scant evidence. No signs of a struggle, no traces of blood, just a frozen moment in time as if Elise had stepped out momentarily intending to return. The candle on the desk, black wax devoid of fragrance. Beneath it, the wood surface warped by residual heat. "What did you uncover?" Morgan inquired of the lead forensic examiner. Multiple sets of fingerprints, mostly degraded with time. The intriguing aspect lies in what's absent. The doorknob and window latches had been wiped clean, inside and out. The investigative team dismantled the baseboards, inspected behind outlets, and scoured for concealed compartments. Beneath a loose floorboard near the closet, they unearthed a small waterproof case containing a flash drive and a key. The key unlocked a safe deposit box at Northern Trust Bank, revealing another flash drive and folders of documents. The papers delineated financial transactions between Westridge Pharmaceuticals and offshore accounts associated with several partners at Harriman and Associates. Digital analysis retrieved data from both drives, exposing audio recordings and spreadsheets detailing manipulated data from drug trials for Westridge's flagship medication, Neurapax. The recordings featured Elise's voice alongside that of a man identified as Vincent Harriman, a senior partner. "These figures must not surface publicly," Harriman was heard saying. "Adverse effects afflicted nearly 40% of patients, not the reported 4%. If this information leaks, the firm is ruined and Westridge shares plummet." "People are perishing," Elise retorted. "Seizures are occurring precisely as the initial data predicted." "This conversation never transpired," Harriman asserted. "Remember, what we discuss within these walls remains here, for everyone's protection." Detective Morgan engaged with pharmaceutical regulators, corroborating that Neurapax had been discreetly withdrawn from circulation after a series of patient deaths aligned with the documented side effects hidden in Elise's files. Subpoenas were issued for Harriman's personal and corporate records, yielding no direct link to Elise's disappearance until traces of an industrial cleaning service charge at his holiday residence surfaced the day following her vanishing. Upon scouring the property, minute traces of blood matching Elise's DNA profile were unearthed despite thorough cleansing efforts. The evidence, though circumstantial, bore damning implications. The enigma of the locked chamber persisted until Morgan reviewed surveillance footage from neighboring premises. A figure resembling Harriman's silhouette approached the residence on the stormy night of Elise's disappearance. The footage revealed his entry but not his departure through any visible exit. Returning to the bedroom with a structural engineer, they unveiled a concealed passage in the rear of the closet, leading to maintenance tunnels beneath several blocks of aged residences in the vicinity. The passage had been concealed with fresh drywall, seamlessly blending with the original wall. Vincent Harriman was apprehended during a board meeting. Confronted with the evidence, he adamantly professed his innocence, alleging Elise had intended to abscond with incriminating documents. She was unstable, delusional, he asserted to investigators. Fabricated evidence to tarnish the firm after being passed over for promotion. The jury rendered a different verdict. Footage retrieved from Elise's covert camera secreted within a bookend on her shelf captured Harriman entering her quarters that fateful night. The recording abruptly terminated as he approached her desk while she sat engrossed in writing. Prosecutors surmised that after Elise's demise, Harriman secured the door from within using a simple mechanism involving string and a hook, escaping through the concealed passage. Years later, before the new occupants arrived, he revisited to ensure no trace remained to implicate him. Inadvertently, he preserved the scene precisely as investigators required to uncover the truth. Harriman was convicted of first-degree murder despite the absence of her remains. The pharmaceutical executives implicated in the fraud faced separate charges. Patients' families who lost loved ones to Neurapax side effects pursued a class action lawsuit, unveiling widespread corruption. At the sentencing hearing, Elise's mother addressed the court. "My daughter's chamber remained untouched, safeguarding the truth she sacrificed her life to expose. She never truly departed that room. Her quest for justice lingered inside, awaiting discovery. The prospective tenants never materialized. The residence now stands vacant once more, its secrets laid bare yet etched in memory. Locals steer clear after nightfall, averting their gaze from the edifice." Some claim to glimpse a flickering light in the upper window, the sanctum, where a young woman faced off against formidable adversaries who believed their transgressions would remain concealed indefinitely. Justice found Elise Winters not in life, but in the legacy she left behind. The room she never truly vacated became both her sepulcher and her testament. Story 17. In the quiet hours before dawn, a woman felt the urge to transform the nursery, to infuse it with new life before the arrival of her baby. The walls, once a faded blue, whispered tales of the past, secrets buried beneath layers of paint. As she carefully applied the first coat of pristine white, a hidden message began to emerge, faint at first, then gaining clarity with each stroke. Don't let it hear you. Her heart skipped a beat, a shiver running down her spine. Stepping back, she noticed something peculiar, tiny handprints imprinted in the fresh paint, too high for any child to reach. This discovery within the nursery of the Morgan residence marked the genesis of what would later be known as the Whispering House case. The young couple had acquired the Victorian-style home at a bargain price, unaware of the lurking shadows within its walls. Detective Sarah Klein, with a notebook clutched in her hand, approached the residence, greeted by a pregnant woman adorned in paint-stained overalls. Weariness clouded the woman's eyes, evidence of sleepless nights. She recounted the unsettling find of the hidden message and eerie handprints, revealing that the previous owners had vanished under mysterious circumstances, leaving only with essentials in the dead of night. Inside the historic home, the detective's footsteps echoed on weathered floorboards as she entered the nursery, where remnants of the cryptic message still lingered. Next to it, 5 child-sized handprints marred the fresh paint, a chilling testament to the unknown. Back at the precinct, Detective Klein delved into records of the property, uncovering a troubling pattern of frequent turnovers and unsettling reports from past inhabitants, particularly families with children. Further investigation unveiled the house's dark history, once belonging to Eleanor Blackwood, a widow who ran an orphanage on the premises. Tragedy befell the 5 children under her care, their disappearances shrouded in mystery. The detective's pursuit of the truth led her to interviews with former residents, each recounting eerie occurrences and the appearance of cryptic warnings upon repainting the nursery walls. With the current owner's reluctant consent, the basement was scanned, revealing anomalous shapes beneath the concrete floor. A grim discovery followed the remains of 5 children, arranged in a haunting circle, bearing pendants engraved with their names. Forensic evidence pointed to their demise during Eleanor's tenure, dispelling the notion of their supposed escape. Luminol sprayed in the nursery unveiled a haunting sight, countless handprints glowing in the darkness, a silent plea from the past etched into the very fabric of the house. Eleanor's journals shed light on her macabre intentions, seeking to harness the children's essence for her own longevity. As the truth emerged, justice was finally served for the innocent victims, their names no longer lost to history, but recorded as victims of a heinous crime. Despite the closure brought by the investigation, an unexplainable presence lingered within the house, a spectral echo of the past reaching out through time and paint. The nursery walls, tainted by sorrow, were dismantled in an attempt to erase the horrors that had transpired within. Yet whispers persisted among the workers, voices of unseen children echoing through the debris, unsettling all who dared to linger after dusk. The house, tainted by its dark legacy, was condemned, a solemn reminder of the mysteries that lay dormant within its walls. Detective Klein, in her final report, immortalized the chilling evidence, a photograph capturing 5 luminous handprints, a poignant reminder that some secrets transcend mortal boundaries, leaving an indelible mark on the tapestry of time. And so the whispering house remained a silent witness to the unresolved questions that lingered in the realm between the living and the departed. Story 18. The aged envelope bore witness to time's passage, its once white edges now tinged with a fading yellow hue. Yet a fresh stamp adorned its upper corner, a stark contrast to its weathered appearance, hinting at a recent journey. With cautious hands, the detective unfolded its contents, revealing a solitary sheet of paper bearing a message typed in a hurried, uneven script. "I am sorry for what I did," the words whispered from the page, shrouded in a veil of mystery. Detective Sarah Morgan's fingers brushed against the paper, sensing a dampness that clung to it, accompanied by a faint metallic scent that lingered in the air. A reddish smear along the bottom edge caught her attention, distinct from the ink of the typed message. Carefully, she secured the letter in an evidence bag, her gloved hands moving with practiced precision, mindful of the weight of the truth it held. The forensics team's findings confirmed her suspicions. The reddish stain was indeed human blood, a grim echo of a past unsolved homicide case that had cast a shadow over the department for years. The victim, a young journalist named Rebecca Warren, had been discovered in her apartment, bearing the cruel markings of a violent end. Her laptop was missing, her notes scattered like fallen leaves, hinting at a connection between her untimely demise and the unfinished tale she had sought to uncover. Despite tireless efforts, the case had grown cold, slipping through the cracks of countless interviews and exhaustive investigations. And now a solitary letter had emerged, finding its way to the police department with a chilling simplicity, addressed only to the Homicide Division. Sparse fingerprints on the paper and envelope hinted at a careful sender, one shrouded in shadows and secrets. But the postmark offered a flicker of hope, a slender thread to grasp in the vast darkness of uncertainty. Gathering her team in the dimly lit briefing room, Morgan's gaze swept over the walls adorned with snapshots of crime scenes, intricate timelines, and elusive suspect profiles that had led them in circles. Pinning the image of the letter at the heart of their collective pursuit, she spoke softly, her words carrying a weight of revelation. "This changes everything," she murmured, a ripple of anticipation threading through the room. "Our perpetrator bears the burden of remorse." Detective James Chen, her steadfast partner in this labyrinth of shadows, met her gaze, his voice a counterpoint of caution. "Or perhaps it is a facade," he mused, his words a whisper of doubt. "A carefully orchestrated charade to deceive us, to lead us astray." The forensics team's diligent efforts unveiled the unique impression patterns of the typewriter, tracing them back to a bygone model lost to time's embrace. Rare, yet not beyond reach, their search expanded, reaching out to antique aficionados and collectors scattered across the region, each step a dance with the past. As the investigation gained momentum, they delved into Rebecca's world, peeling back the layers of her life like pages in a forgotten manuscript. Her editor's words painted a portrait of resilience, a relentless pursuit of truth amidst a tapestry of deceit. Her last assignment, a tangled web of intrigue involving a prominent family embroiled in local politics, whispered of shadows lurking beneath polished facades. Interviewing Rebecca's boyfriend, Michael Barnes, unearthed a tremor of unease beneath his composed exterior. With the truth of the letter lingering between them, he spoke of her fears, of a shadow that stalked her steps, a ghost of her own making. She felt eyes upon her, a specter of danger. His words hung heavy in the air, a confession wrapped in regret. Amidst the tangled threads of their investigation, a second missive arrived, bearing the same typewritten words, the same crimson stain of remembrance. This time the message unfurled a tale of secrets laid bare, of whispers carried on the wind. She unraveled the threads of our family's tapestry, it confessed, a confession laced with sorrow and regret. "I never intended for it to end this way." Their journey led them to the grand mansion of the deceased patriarch, where truths lay buried beneath layers of opulence and deceit. The eldest son, Richard, stood at the center of their scrutiny, his collection of antiquities harboring a dark secret. Questioned about the vintage typewriters that bore witness to their tale, his words rang hollow, a facade crumbling under the weight of truth. A breakthrough emerged as microscopic fibers on the envelopes whispered of a connection to custom stationery exclusive to the family's youngest daughter, Eleanor. A revelation unfolded as she unveiled Richard's request for her stationery, a request cloaked in deception. A search of Richard's abode unveiled a hidden chamber, a shrine to secrets long buried, containing relics of Rebecca's demise. The dance of shadows revealed a hidden alliance between Richard and Michael, a pact forged in shadows and sealed in blood. Financial transactions traced a web of deceit, weaving a tapestry of betrayal and greed. Confronted with the echoes of his past deeds, Michael's resolve crumbled, his words a confession of complicity. "I never meant for it to end this way," his voice trembled, a whisper in the dark. And in a final act of revelation, Eleanor stepped forward, bearing a recording that echoed with the weight of truth. A clandestine conversation between Richard and Michael, a pact sealed in whispers of darkness. Richard's voice, clear and unrepentant, spoke of silencing the truth, of erasing the echoes of a life cut short. As the wheels of justice turned, Richard's facade of innocence crumbled, his protestations lost in the storm of evidence that surrounded him. The jury's deliberations were swift, their verdict a condemnation of deeds done in shadows. And as Richard was led away, the weight of his sins bore down upon him, a legacy of remorse and regret. Approaching Rebecca's grieving parents in the hushed courtroom, Detective Morgan offered no words, only a silent promise of justice served. The blood-stained letters, now relics of a bygone tale, remained in evidence storage, a reminder that even the most carefully woven webs of deceit unravel beneath the weight of truth. The case of Rebecca Warren stood as a testament to the shadows that lurk within us all, a reminder that the echoes of the past can never truly be silenced. And in the quiet of the night, as the stars whispered their lullabies, the truth remained a whisper in the dark, a tale told in shadows and light. Story 19. In a quiet suburban neighborhood, a mysterious key arrived in the mail for Sarah Miller, hidden in a plain envelope without a return address. The brass key, aged and unfamiliar, seemed to beckon to her with a sense of eerie recognition. Sarah attempted every lock in her possession, but none yielded to the key's touch. Perplexed, she set it down on her coffee table, and to her astonishment, the long silent grandfather clock in the hallway emitted a solitary, haunting chime. Intrigued yet unsettled, Sarah contacted the authorities to report the strange occurrence. At first, the responding officer brushed off her concerns as a simple mistake in the mail. However, Sarah's intuition whispered that something was amiss. Reluctantly, the officer accepted the key as evidence, placing it in a small evidence bag that would unknowingly spark a chain of events leading to a chilling investigation. Detective Robert Harmon, a seasoned investigator from the Special Victims Unit, received the case file during a routine morning briefing. As he examined the unassuming brass key resting on his desk, a subtle unease crept over him. Background checks on Sarah revealed no criminal past, just a retired teacher living a quiet life. The forensic team found no fingerprints on the key except for Sarah's, and the envelope revealed no clues besides a vague postmark. A breakthrough came when Detective Harmon decided to delve deeper into the key's unique pattern. A connection emerged to a cold case from years past a storage unit tied to disturbing discoveries of violence and vanished women. The original investigation had hit a dead end, but now, with a new lead, the case regained momentum. As the investigation progressed, Sarah's anxiety mounted, leading her to fortify her home with additional security measures. Meanwhile, the search for the key's sender intensified. Through meticulous genealogical analysis, the focus narrowed to Harold Jenkins, a former neighbor with a shadowy past that hinted at dark secrets. The true horror unfurled when investigators uncovered a hidden room beneath the floorboards of a cabin linked to Jenkins. Inside were rows of brass keys, each bearing a name, a macabre catalog of victims. The discovery of human remains buried nearby revealed the extent of Jenkins' atrocities, shocking the community to its core. The manhunt for Jenkins escalated, culminating in a tense standoff in the wilderness. In a final act of defiance, Jenkins chose to end his own life rather than face justice. His journal, found alongside his body, contained chilling confessions and a message directed at Sarah, the unwitting recipient of his twisted gift. The investigation unearthed a total of 32 victims, bringing closure to families long haunted by uncertainty. Sarah, forever changed by the ordeal, could never return to her home, haunted by the realization of how close she had come to the darkness lurking in her midst. The case of the Keymaster serves as a stark reminder of the horrors that can hide behind a facade of normalcy. While the keys may unlock nothing tangible, they open a window into the depths of human depravity, a sobering truth that lingers in the silent halls of justice, a reminder of lives lost and the lingering shadows cast by those who prey on the unsuspecting. Story 20: The Enigmatic Victorian House. She crossed the threshold into the abandoned Victorian, a haze of dust dancing in the still air around her. The house, frozen in time, stood with peeling walls and furniture shrouded in ghostly sheets. Each step she took felt like a journey into a forgotten moment, except for one peculiar detail. The doors, no matter which one she opened, they all led back to the same room. The parlor, a perpetual loop, a maze with no escape except the way she came. But when she turned to retrace her steps, the front door had vanished, leaving her trapped within the house's enigmatic embrace. The discovery of Morgan Pierce's body transformed the decrepit Victorian from a mere local oddity to a haunting crime scene. Detective Sarah Lind lingered at the threshold, observing forensic experts moving silently through the dim interior like spectral figures. The house had gained notoriety in the town, a place where compasses spun aimlessly, where whispers of unseen eyes watching lingered in the air. Now it held secrets far darker than mere folklore. The initial assessment suggests she passed 3 days ago, the medical examiner murmured, his voice a mere whisper in the eerie stillness. Asphyxiation seems to be the cause of death. Morgan had been discovered seated in an antique chair in the parlor, her gaze fixed towards the entrance as if awaiting a visitor. Her countenance serene, hands folded with precision in her lap, no signs of struggle, no marks of defense. The scene exuded a chilling tranquility that unsettled even the seasoned investigators. "Who found the body?" Lind inquired, scanning her notes intently. "A real estate agent showing the property to potential buyers," her partner replied. They entered, spotted her seated there, initially mistaking her for a trespasser until they drew closer. The Victorian had remained uninhabited since the passing of its previous owner, Eleanor Blackwood, nearly 5 years earlier. Legal disputes had left the property in a state of neglect, unwanted, unsold, a relic forgotten by all except vandals and thrill-seekers. Morgan Pierce, aged 26, a graduate student delving into architectural anomalies for her thesis. Known for her meticulous nature, ambition, and fascination with spaces that defied conventional norms. The abandoned Victorian, notorious for disorienting its visitors, must have beckoned to her like a siren's call. Her roommate reported her missing 2 days ago, Lind noted. Morgan mentioned visiting the house where people get lost for her research. The investigation unveiled Morgan's frequent visits to the Victorian in the weeks leading to her demise. Her journal entries chronicled peculiar acoustics, chilling cold spots, and doors that led to different destinations each time they swung open. In her final notation, she spoke of intending to document the spatial inconsistencies with specialized equipment, a gear that remained conspicuously absent. During the autopsy, an unexpected revelation emerged: traces of a rare alkaloid in Morgan's system, derived from a plant linked to certain shamanic practices. While the substance could induce disorientation and vivid hallucinations, the quantities found were insufficient to be fatal. She wasn't one to indulge in recreational substances, her boyfriend asserted during interrogation. Morgan was meticulous in her approach to research. Deliberately altering her senses would have been inconceivable to her. Digital forensics unearthed fragments of erased messages on Morgan's phone, dialogues with an individual who shared her fascination with the house, someone claiming to comprehend its hidden truths. The exchanges grew progressively intimate and cryptic. The house retains the memories of its past, one message disclosed. It yearns for someone to unveil its secrets. The investigation steered towards Adam Reeves, an architectural historian who had corresponded with Morgan. His expertise in rare spatial phenomena captured her interest, evolving their professional rapport into a more personal connection. When questioned, Reeves appeared genuinely shattered by her demise. "The house carries a reputation," he elaborated. "The original architect embedded optical illusions and deceptive perspectives within its design. It was meant to confound and bewilder." Morgan believed there existed a deeper layer to it beyond mere tricks of construction. However, Reeves possessed a solid alibi for the presumed time of Morgan's passing. Surveillance footage depicted him delivering a lecture at a university symposium located several hours away. A breakthrough surfaced from an unexpected informant, Eleanor Blackwood's grandson, now residing overseas. Contacted by the investigators, he divulged a long-held family secret. "My grandmother wasn't the sole Blackwood to meet their end in that house," he divulged. "Others followed, always found in the parlor, always appearing peaceful. The family labeled it the claiming." He furnished the detectives with journals spanning generations, chronicling demises initially attributed to natural causes like heart failure or stroke. The recurring pattern was unmistakable: individuals spending prolonged periods within the house inevitably succumbed to what the family euphemistically termed the influence. A secondary scouring of the premises unveiled a concealed compartment behind the parlor hearth. Nestled within, investigators unearthed Morgan's missing equipment and something more: a small enclave housing artifacts from diverse indigenous cultures, meticulously arranged in a precise geometric formation. At its core rested a sculpted figurine, its features worn smooth by generations of handling. Analysis identified the statuette as a representation of a deity associated with liminal spaces, gateways between realms. The residue on the artifacts matched the alkaloid discovered in Morgan's system. The case took a darker turn, with forensic analysis indicating the presence of another individual within the house at the time of Morgan's demise. Partial fingerprints incongruous with Morgan's or any known visitors were retrieved from doorknobs scattered throughout the dwelling. 3 weeks into the inquiry, Adam Reeves was discovered lifeless in his residence. Like Morgan, he was found seated facing the entrance, an expression of serene repose gracing his features, the same alkaloid detected in his system. Clasped in his hand was a key that eluded identification within his abode, but seamlessly fit the concealed compartment in the Victorian. In his final missive, sent to himself as if inscribing a testament, Reeves inscribed, "The house doesn't ensnare you physically, it ensnares your perception." Morgan was correct, the doors lead where they always have, yet something deceives you into believing you're trapped in a cycle. Once you grasp the truth, departure is within reach, but by then, departure holds no allure. The case, officially unresolved, lingers as suspicious deaths under scrutiny. The Victorian now stands condemned, its access barricaded by the authorities. Yet whispers persist of flickering lights witnessed within its confines on certain evenings, and of guests who venture in but never emerge. Locals speculate that the house claims those who delve too deeply into its enigmas. Others contend that Morgan and Reeves stumbled upon a potent and age-old force, one existing within the interstices of traditional reality. The verity remains as elusive as an exit in a house where every door leads back to the beginning. Story 21. The village whispered in hushed tones about the dwelling at the edge of the ancient woods. It stood solitary, shrouded in mystery, its windows darkened, its porch burdened by the weight of time. Nobody laid claim to it, nobody could recall its origins. Yet when a band of wanderers strayed too close, they beheld an enigma names etched into the wooden walls, carved deep like cryptic messages. At the end of the list, untouched by time, gleamed a name unfamiliar to all. Until a faint voice quivered, "That name is mine." Under the cloak of night, a call came in. Dispatch logged it as a routine trespassing incident. The caller identified himself as Mason Wright, the leader of the group who stumbled upon his name engraved on the forsaken house. The responding officers anticipated mere mischief, the handiwork of restless youths, but what awaited them defied logic. Detective Sarah Keller arrived as dusk descended upon the forest. Her flashlight pierced the darkness, revealing the time-worn facade of the dwelling. 27 names adorned the eastern wall, some faded with time, others sharp as if freshly carved. And at the base, Mason Wright, the incision still fragrant with sawdust. "I've never set foot here before," Mason declared, his breath materializing in the frigid air. "I cannot fathom how my name found its way here." The inquiry commenced with scrutinizing each name's background. The findings sent shivers down the spines of the investigators. Every name belonged to a soul reported missing in the past 40 years. Some cases remained unresolved, others active. Yet a haunting commonality lingered, all vanished while hiking alone. Forensic experts meticulously documented each carving, noting the depths, techniques, and weathering. The eldest name, Rebecca Hansen, aligned with a missing persons case from decades ago. Detective Keller delved into Mason's history. His account unwavering, he professed no ties to the area beyond the fateful hike with his college comrades. Randomly chosen, the trail held no significance before this eerie revelation. Focus shifted to Mason's companions. Emily Chen, the group's photographer, shared snapshots from their journey. Upon scrutiny, analysts uncovered a disconcerting presence, a shadowy figure lurking in the background of 3 photos. Tall and slender, always obscured by foliage. "We saw no one else on the trail," Emily maintained. "We would have remembered." Ordered by Detective Keller, a search of the house's interior unveiled an unsettling tableau. Personal effects of the missing hikers meticulously arranged on shelves in the basement. Watches, backpacks, cameras, wallets, each tagged with a name from the exterior wall. Bloodstains, concealed over time, hinted at grim events. Cadaver dogs signaled towards the dense forest behind the property, yet no bodies lay buried underneath. As the probe intensified, Mason reported peculiar incidents, whispers in the night, enigmatic footprints leading to his doorstep. The department assigned protection, but his paranoia burgeoned. A breakthrough surfaced with buried land records. The residence belonged to a recluse, Victor Blackwood, who vanished 15 years prior, evading official scrutiny. Granted a warrant, Detective Keller probed deeper into the woods, uncovering a network of primitive hunting blinds. Within one, a journal chronicled chilling observations, prey meticulously stalked, studied, and captured. The hunter's identity unraveled. Victor Blackwood, the elusive figure behind the macabre chronicles. The manhunt for Blackwood spanned territories. Helicopters scoured the woods with thermal imaging. Tactical units combed every crevice, yet the quarry remained elusive. Mason withdrew from contact. Officers summoned to his abode found it deserted. A foreboding message adorned his chamber wall. The hunter becomes the hunted. Weeks passed with no trace of Mason. During a secondary search of Blackwood's abode, a sinister workshop surfaced, a freshly carved wooden piece bearing a new name. The lead forensic technician missing, the victim of a twisted game. Under constant surveillance, the house stood vigil. Cameras recorded every movement, sensors on high alert. One fateful night, an ethereal figure emerged, graceful and slender, defying the surveillance. As the authorities closed in, the figure vanished into the night. To this day, the house remains under watchful eyes. Mason and the technician elude capture. The investigation persists as new vanishings emerge in wooded realms. The names on the wall echo through law enforcement circles, a chilling legend. Some dare not utter them, others avoid the dread entirely. And local trekkers steer clear, fearful that whispers of the house may add their names to the accursed list, names unspoken. Story 22. Renovations always have a way of revealing hidden secrets, a glimpse into the past through forgotten relics and lost treasures. When Sarah and Michael decided to breathe new life into their Victorian-era home, they never expected to unearth a mystery that would send shivers down their spines. Beneath the old floorboards lay a letter, carefully folded and tucked away like a whisper from another time. The paper, fragile and yellowed with age, held a cryptic message: "Don't trust the one who knocked." Before they could make sense of it, 3 distinct knocks reverberated through the empty house, chilling them to the core. Detective Alina Reed, with her seasoned partner, arrived at the scene, the exposed floorboards revealing a hidden void below. With steady hands marked by years of investigating, Reed retrieved the note, knowing that the couple's inadvertent touch had compromised it. Their fear was palpable as they recounted the unsettling sound that had disrupted their peaceful renovation project. Background checks on Sarah and Michael yielded nothing suspicious, just a young couple with a bright future ahead. But the house itself harbored a darker past. Once owned by the reclusive Hargrove family, the property had been left abandoned after the passing of Margaret Hargrove, the last resident. Neighbors spoke fondly of Margaret, a kind widow with no known enemies or secrets. Forensic analysis dated the mysterious note back 2 decades, its words etched with a sense of urgency and fear. Reed delved deeper, uncovering the troubled history of Franklin Hargrove, Margaret's late husband, a respected teacher turned recluse haunted by paranoia in his final years. A breakthrough came when Reed spoke to Margaret's frail sister, who whispered of a shadowy figure known as the Collector, a man who had come knocking with demands for Franklin's unpaid gambling debts. Margaret's terror was real. Her desperation to sell the house to settle the debts met with Franklin's stubborn refusal. Returning to the house with a forensic team, Reed's investigation led to a grim discovery: a hidden cadaver beneath the foundation, the remains of Victor Mercer, a notorious loan shark who had disappeared without a trace decades ago. The pieces of the puzzle fell into place, revealing a tragic tale of debts unpaid, secrets buried, and lives shattered. Margaret's diaries, found hidden in the attic, painted a harrowing picture of her silent suffering, haunted by phantom knocks that echoed through the halls long after Franklin's death. As the truth emerged, justice was served, albeit cold and belated. The house, tainted by its dark history, was sold by Sarah and Michael, its secrets too heavy to bear. Whispers in the local community speak of ghostly echoes in the night, 3 distinct knocks that pierce the silence, a reminder of the past that refuses to fade. The note, now in evidence storage, remains a chilling testament to a tale of betrayal, fear, and tragic secrets left untold. Detective Reed closed the case, acknowledging that some mysteries are destined to remain unsolved, lingering in the shadows of memory. The house stands empty, its renovations abandoned, a silent witness to a past that continues to whisper its secrets in the dead of night. Story 23. The arrival of Michael and Sarah Klein to their new abode was met with a sense of anticipation, a whisper of mystery lingering in the air. The Victorian-era home stood proud, its history woven into the intricate woodwork and soaring ceilings that whispered of bygone tales. The couple, enamored by the charm and allure of the house, had no immediate plans for renovations. Little did they know, the walls held secrets waiting to be unveiled. It began innocuously enough, a water stain in the master bedroom catching Sarah's eye. A simple blemish on the floral wallpaper, or so they thought. As Michael prodded the discolored spot, the paper yielded, revealing layers hidden beneath. Intrigued, they gingerly peeled back the damaged section, unveiling a journey through time etched in paper. First, paisley patterns from the 1970s emerged, followed by stripes from a previous decade. But it was the third layer that held the unexpected: a name repeated endlessly in dark ink on faded beige paper. Eleanor Winters, the name cried out, each repetition more frantic and uneven than the last, etched into the very essence of the wall. Eleanor Winters, Sarah murmured, her touch tracing the haunting script. The discovery sent shivers down their spines, a sense of unease settling in the room like a silent fog. That night, fueled by curiosity and a hint of dread, Michael delved into online archives, searching for any trace of the enigmatic Eleanor Winters. The results were sparse, save for a single entry, a missing persons case from decades past. Eleanor Winters, a young woman with dark hair and piercing eyes, vanished without a trace, leaving behind a void of unanswered questions. What chilled Michael and Sarah to the core was the uncanny resemblance between Eleanor and the woman who had sold them the house, Margaret Cavendish. As their investigation unfolded, the boundaries of reality blurred, and the lines between past and present began to intertwine. The search for Eleanor Winters led them down a rabbit hole of hidden identities and shattered lives. Margaret Cavendish, the elegant woman with silver-streaked hair, bore a secret burden that tied her to the missing woman in ways they could never have fathomed. The walls of the house became a canvas of revelation, each layer peeled back, revealing a fragment of the truth buried deep within. Sarah's determination to unravel the mystery led them on a path fraught with twists and turns, unveiling a tale of obsession and fractured identities. The discovery of a hidden space beneath the floorboards only deepened the enigma, as a trove of identification cards bearing different names came to light. Alina Winters, Margaret Cavendish, the names intertwined in a dance of deception, spun by a mind fractured beyond repair. Forensic teams descended upon the house, turning it into a hub of activity as they meticulously examined the walls that whispered of long-buried secrets. Handwriting experts compared the scrawled name to Alina's own writing, only to be met with inconclusive results that left more questions than answers. But it was the DNA analysis that shattered the illusion, linking Alina Winters to a psychiatric patient named Rebecca Eldridge. A tale of dissociative identity disorder unfolded, painting a portrait of a fractured soul seeking solace in stolen identities and desperate attempts at self-preservation. The excavation of the backyard unearthed grim reminders of a past long forgotten. Alina Winters, once lost to the depths of time, found her final resting place beneath the soil, her story intertwined with that of Rebecca Eldridge, the chameleon who had assumed her identity with deadly consequences. Justice, though delayed, finally found its mark as Rebecca, in a moment of clarity, confessed to the crime that had haunted the house for decades. The names on the wall, a testament to a mind torn asunder, now stood as a memorial to the truth that could no longer be denied. Michael and Sarah, unwitting players in a drama of deceit and tragedy, watched as the house they had hoped to make their own became a relic of a dark past. The walls whispered of secrets long kept hidden, a chilling reminder that some mysteries are best left undisturbed, lest they consume those who dare to uncover them. And as night fell, shrouding the house in a cloak of darkness, the whispers of the past faded into the stillness, lulling the world into a slumber haunted by the echoes of a tale untold. Story 24. In the quiet of the night, a flicker danced across the baby monitor's screen, a fleeting anomaly that caught the mother's attention. At first, she brushed it off as mere interference, a glitch in the digital realm, but then the silence was broken by crackling static and a voice, soft and chilling, whispered, "SHHH, go back to sleep." A shiver ran down her spine, sending tendrils of fear curling around her heart. With a pounding pulse, she hurried to her son's room, the air thick with an unspoken dread. As she flung open the door, her eyes fell upon an empty crib, a void where her precious child should have been nestled. The room was unchanged, untouched by human hands. The window remained shut, the door securely locked. The only unsettling detail was the stuffed rabbit lying on the floor, its black eyes glinting in the dim light as if aware of secrets hidden in the shadows. In the midst of her panic, Rebecca's screams pierced the stillness, raw and desperate, echoing through the house until the neighbors, stirred from their slumber, dialed emergency services. When the authorities arrived, they found her cradling the stuffed rabbit, her world shattered, lost in a nightmare without end. Samuel, her 4-month-old son, had vanished without a trace, leaving behind only unanswered questions and a void in her soul. The investigation that followed was cloaked in mystery. No evidence of forced entry marred the pristine facade of the home. The security system stood silent sentinel, undisturbed by the events that had transpired within its walls. The baby monitor footage, once a benign observer, now held a sinister secret, a voice from the shadows, a whisper of malevolence. Suspicion turned its gaze upon Rebecca, her grief-stricken facade scrutinized under the harsh light of interrogation. Whispers tainted the air, casting shadows upon her sorrow. Her husband, Daniel, absent during the night of Samuel's disappearance, hovered on the periphery of suspicion, his return laden with unspoken truths. A glimmer of hope emerged from the darkness when forensic analysis uncovered microscopic fibers on the nursery windowsill, a silent witness to an intruder's clandestine entry. The threads of truth led the investigators down a winding path, revealing a figure cloaked in darkness, moving with purpose through the night. As the focus shifted, Daniel's return brought with it a storm of revelations. His hands bore the mark of unseen struggles, his words laden with half-truths and shadows of deceit. A web of lies unfurled, exposing a second life hidden in the shadows, a past entwined with secrets long buried. The baby monitor, once a conduit of comfort, now stood as a beacon of betrayal. Its digital eyes had been tampered with, its voice manipulated by unseen hands. The truth, when unearthed, lay in a forgotten basement where Samuel was found, a pawn in a game of loss and longing. Elaine, a specter from the past, emerged from the shadows, her presence a haunting echo of a life left behind. Her eyes, vacant and haunted, held the key to a twisted tale of obsession and despair. The threads of fate intertwined, connecting lives torn asunder by grief and greed. In the hushed courtroom, the truth unfurled like a dark tapestry, woven with lies and deceit. The whispered words from the baby monitor echoed through the silence, carrying with them a damning truth, a truth that shattered lives and left scars that would never fully heal. As the gavel fell, justice meted out its verdict, casting the perpetrators into the abyss of their own making. Rebecca and Samuel, survivors of a nightmarish ordeal, sought solace in a new beginning, far from the shadows of the past. The baby monitor, silent witness to a tragedy untold, held within its digital heart the echoes of a night when innocence was stolen. And as the world drifted into slumber, the truth remained, a whisper in the darkness, a reminder of the fragility of peace. Story 25, The Mystery in the Attic. The ancient box lay hidden beneath layers of clutter in the attic, a silent witness to the passage of time in the old house. Among its contents were faded Polaroids, capturing moments of joy and celebration from years long gone. Each photograph spoke of ordinary lives, of familial bonds and shared laughter, until she came upon the final image. In that last picture, taken in her own living room, familiarity gave way to unease. The scene was eerily identical, same furniture, same decor, yet the family portrayed was not her own. And lurking in the shadows behind them, a figure stood watching, barely discernible in the dimness. Rebecca's hand trembled as she examined the photograph, a chill creeping up her spine, setting the edges of the Polaroid vibrating with her unease. The family in the picture, frozen in a moment of happiness, seemed oblivious to the danger lurking just beyond their smiles. Carrying the unsettling image downstairs, the weight of the house pressed down on Rebecca, its emptiness now suffocating rather than comforting. Placing the photograph on the kitchen counter, she studied it under the harsh artificial light, the uncanny resemblance between her home and the strangers in the photo sending shivers down her spine. Enter Detective Morgan, a seasoned investigator with a weathered leather jacket and eyes that missed nothing. With a methodical air, he examined the photograph, flipping it over to reveal a blank back. Inquiring about the previous owners, the Nelsons, he delved into the mystery that had taken root in Rebecca's home. As the investigation unfolded, a pattern emerged. Families had come and gone from the house, leaving no trace behind. The Sutherlands, the latest in a string of disappearances, had left behind a haunting photograph and a trail of unanswered questions. Forensic analysis hinted at a sinister presence in the shadows, a male figure with an unsettling stillness about him. Digging deeper, Detective Morgan uncovered a dark history entwined with the very foundation of the house. Families had vanished over the years, always after precisely 1 year of residency. An architect, a construction accident, and a missing project manager named Samuel Whitfield emerged as key players in the chilling narrative. Beneath the basement floor, the truth lay buried literally. The missing families, perfectly preserved in the earth, revealed a horror beyond imagination. Among their belongings, a camera and a journal hinted at a meticulous observer, someone who had watched, waited, and ultimately acted on a sinister plan. Rebecca's safety now at risk, she sought refuge in a hotel, haunted by the knowledge that she had stumbled upon something malevolent. A mysterious phone call in the dead of night, the mechanical click of a camera, and the development of a new Polaroid only added to her terror. The house, now a crime scene, held its secrets close, refusing to yield them entirely. Samuel Whitfield's fate remained shrouded in mystery, his presence a lingering threat to those who dared to uncover the truth. As new families moved in and out of the shadows, the watchful eyes of the past remained ever vigilant, ensuring that the legacy of the man in the photograph endured a chilling reminder of the darkness that lurked within the walls of the old house. Story 26, the aging apartment exuded a sense of history, its walls holding secrets whispered by time. The heating system emitted low groans, the pipes occasionally rattled a familiar symphony of the old building. She had grown accustomed to these sounds, finding solace in their predictability. But one night, as she lay in bed, a faint voice drifted through the vents, barely audible yet undeniably real. It wasn't the typical murmur of a neighbor's conversation. It was a whisper calling to her, calling her name. Intrigued and slightly unnerved, she approached the vent, listening intently. As she pressed her ear against the grate, a rush of cold air brushed against her cheek, followed by a soft, almost playful voice, "I know you can hear me." Detective Morgan Shaw stood in the center of the empty apartment, a sense of unease settling in the air around her. Her sharp gaze fixated on the rusted vent cover that had been forcibly removed from the wall. The forensics team moved methodically, capturing every detail with their cameras as if preserving a moment frozen in time. The missing woman, Alina Reeves, had been absent for a week before her absence was noticed, a mystery that now unfolded before Shaw's eyes. Officer Patel, his voice steady, recounted details from his notepad. Alina had reported hearing voices through the vents, but her concerns had been dismissed as mere quirks of an old building by the management. Shaw knelt beside the vent, studying the deep scratch marks surrounding it, a silent testament to a struggle that had taken place within these walls. Fingernail marks etched in desperation, a haunting reminder of a futile attempt to escape from within. Alina Reeves, a beloved kindergarten teacher, had left behind a life filled with warmth and affection. Her disappearance had left a void in the lives of those who knew her. Shaw learned of Alina's growing paranoia in the days leading up to her vanishing act. Her sister, with a tremble in her voice, spoke of Alina's fears of being watched, of voices speaking to her through the very vents that now held secrets of their own. As Shaw delved deeper into the investigation, the apartment revealed subtle clues, a silent narrative woven into its very fabric. The meticulously made bed, the abandoned coffee mug in the sink, the chair positioned beneath the vent, as if waiting for a listener, each detail whispered of a presence that lingered, unseen yet palpable. The forensics report unveiled chilling revelations. Fibers from Alina's favorite cardigan trapped in the vent, a foreign fingerprint on the inside of the cover, and haunting audio recordings retrieved from Alina's phone. Alone in her car, raindrops tapping a melancholic rhythm on the roof, Shaw listened to the recordings that spoke of a haunting encounter and exchange between Alina and a voice that seemed to transcend reality, a voice that beckoned from the shadows. A deeper dive into the building's history unearthed a disturbing pattern. Previous tenants had fled, leaving behind tales of unseen terrors within the walls. One had even suffered from hallucinations induced by carbon monoxide, claiming to hear voices calling from the vents. The building superintendent, Harold Weber, emerged as a person of interest, his demeanor shifting subtly when questioned about apartment 4B's troubled past. The investigation took a chilling turn when a hidden passage behind a loose tile in Alina's bathroom was discovered. A narrow corridor snaking through the walls, a clandestine route to the building's ventilation system. Within this hidden realm, a trove of evidence awaited personal belongings, remnants of a life observed from the shadows, a voyeuristic symphony orchestrated by an unseen maestro. A search of Weber's residence painted a picture of calculated obsession. His computer held a digital archive of his victims, meticulously categorized by apartment numbers, audio recordings, photographs, a digital diary chronicling his disturbing fixation with Alina. Shaw's blood ran cold as she unearthed the depths of Weber's twisted infatuation, a dark dance conducted in the shadows of the building's very structure. Weber's arrest was met with eerie calmness, his demeanor a mask for the horrors he had orchestrated. He spoke of a connection with the building, a symbiosis that transcended reason. As the truth emerged, a macabre tapestry unfolded, revealing a predator lurking in the walls, manipulating lives like marionettes in a shadow play of his making. At the trial, Weber's facade crumbled, his delusions laid bare for all to see. The jury's swift verdict echoed the finality of justice, served a sentence that sealed Weber's fate as a ghost haunting the memories of those he had tormented. As he was led away, a hollow smile played upon his lips, a whispered promise of eternal presence, a haunting legacy that lingered in the very bones of the building. Today, the once vibrant apartment building stands vacant, a silent witness to the horrors that once unfolded within its aging walls. Despite attempts at renewal, whispers still echo through the vents, a reminder of a past that refuses to be forgotten. The heating system groans, the pipes rattle a ghostly serenade that lulls the restless into a slumber haunted by the shadows of a bygone era. Story 27. She stood before the mirror, the steam dissipating under her gentle touch as she wiped it clean. Her reflection gazed back at her, familiar yet somehow distant. Everything seemed in its place, her features, her attire. Yet an unsettling feeling crept over her, growing with each passing moment. A flicker caught in the corner of her eye, a movement that defied explanation. As she turned away, her reflection remained fixed, observing her every move. The tale of Rebecca Thorne began in that quiet moment of unease within her bathroom. What unfolded thereafter puzzled investigators and left a community shrouded in mystery for years to come. Rebecca resided alone in a modest abode nestled within a serene suburban enclave. Known to be methodical and reserved, she led a solitary life, though she maintained amicable relations with her neighbors. Her occupation as a data analyst tethered her to a life of routine and precision. No one could have foreseen that she would become enmeshed in one of the most enigmatic criminal inquiries of the era. The initial signs were subtle. Objects within Rebecca's dwelling appeared slightly askew, nothing missing, merely rearranged. A mug perched on an unfamiliar shelf, books repositioned, her toothbrush displaced. She attributed these anomalies to fatigue, the consequence of prolonged hours spent poring over spreadsheets under harsh fluorescent lights. Detective Marion Shaw was first alerted to the peculiar occurrences when Rebecca, after enduring weeks of disturbances, finally reached out to the authorities. The initial evaluation yielded no conclusive evidence of criminal activity, hinting at a potential mental health concern rather than a matter for law enforcement. Shaw duly noted the complaint, consigning it to a heap of non-urgent cases. No tangible evidence, Shaw later recounted. No signs of forced entry, no missing items. just a woman tormented by a pervasive sense of unease within her own home. The pivotal moment arrived with the bathroom mirror incident. During her subsequent interaction with the police, Rebecca recounted the episode vividly, the uncanny movement of her reflection, the feeling of being surveilled even in solitude. This time she offered proof, footage captured by a security camera she had installed, trained on her front entrance. The recording unveiled a sight that sent a shiver down the spines of even the most seasoned officers. The grainy visuals depicted Rebecca departing for work in the morning, followed, 20 minutes later, by an identical figure using a key to access her residence. Forensic experts scrutinized the footage for signs of tampering or digital manipulation, yet their search yielded naught. The individual entering mirrored Rebecca's movements, attire, and even bore the distinctive leather bag that belonged to her. However, according to the timestamp footage from her workplace security system, Rebecca had already scanned into her office building miles away. "We are facing a doppelganger scenario," Detective Shaw informed her superiors. "An individual who has meticulously studied Ms. Thorne and can replicate her with alarming precision." The investigation deepened. Fingerprints found throughout the apartment exclusively matched Rebecca's, devoid of any foreign DNA. Neighbors reported nothing amiss, merely the routine comings and goings of Rebecca. One neighbor, Mrs. Keller, recalled greeting Rebecca upon her return one evening, receiving no response, a deviation from her customary behavior but not a cause for alarm. Rebecca commenced documenting the disruptions in a journal. Minor alterations within her abode escalated, food vanished from her fridge, unremembered online searches cluttered her computer, and unsettlingly, photographs surfaced on her phone, self-portraits bearing her likeness, yet captured without her knowledge. In some images, her countenance appeared subtly altered, her smile too wide, her gaze too intense. "I fear I am losing my mind," she confided to Detective Shaw during their third interaction. "Or perhaps someone desires me to believe so." A breakthrough emerged when investigators discerned a pattern within the security footage. The doppelganger only infiltrated when Rebecca departed for specific engagements, therapy sessions, yoga classes, Sunday grocery outings, predetermined activities with foreseeable durations. "An individual well acquainted with your routine," Shaw elucidated. "This is no happenstance. It is a calculated act of surveillance and infiltration." A forensic psychologist posited that they were confronting a fixation case, someone fixated on assuming Rebecca's identity, potentially supplanting her entirely. Though rare, such instances were chronicled in psychological annals. The offender typically suffered a psychological fracture, fixating on a target who symbolized something they coveted: stability, beauty, success, normalcy. The focus of the inquiry sharpened when Rebecca mentioned a former co-worker, Lily Winters, dismissed due to escalating erratic behavior. Lily had closely collaborated with Rebecca, often remarking on their shared traits. Following her termination, she dispatched a series of disquieting emails to Rebecca, one of which read, "We could be one and the same. At times, I feel more like you than you do." Detective Shaw secured a warrant to search Lily's dwelling. What they uncovered metamorphosed the case from eerie to chilling. Within one chamber of Lily's abode, they encountered a shrine-like replica of Rebecca's bedroom. The walls adorned with photographs, countless snapshots of Rebecca entering her dwelling, shopping, socializing, all clandestinely taken. A closet harbored duplicates of Rebecca's attire, while a vanity displayed makeup brands identical to Rebecca's preferences, accompanied by meticulous notes detailing her mannerisms, speech patterns, and daily routines. Most damning were the practice videos, Lily mimicking Rebecca's gait, gestures, and expressions. The evolution was apparent, initial attempts awkward and conspicuous, later iterations nearly indiscernible from the authentic Rebecca. "She aspired to become me," murmured Rebecca upon perusing the evidence. "She wasn't merely imitating me, she was eradicating me." Forensic examiners uncovered sophisticated paraphernalia for replicating keys and cloning electronic access cards. Lily had orchestrated an intricate system to monitor Rebecca's movements, including a calendar predicting her schedule in meticulous detail. What eluded investigators was Lily's ultimate objective. Journals discovered in her residence contained rambling entries vacillating between first and third person, at times alluding to Rebecca as me and her within the same passage. The final entry sent a shiver down their spines. "Soon, only one of us shall endure. The stronger entity shall prevail." Upon authorities' attempt to apprehend Lily, she had vanished. Her domicile bore signs of a hurried departure, drawers left ajar, certain technologies absent. A nationwide alert was issued. Rebecca was relocated to a secure locale under continuous surveillance, while every site linked to her past existence underwent vigilant monitoring for 3 weeks. Lily remained elusive. The saga took a disquieting twist when a security officer at Rebecca's former workplace reported an anomaly. Despite being on leave, Rebecca had been sighted entering the edifice. Surveillance footage corroborated the account. An individual mirroring Rebecca had accessed the premises using a valid ID card, proceeded to her former cubicle, and pored over her documents for 40 minutes before exiting. Simultaneously, the authentic Rebecca resided in seclusion at a safe-guarded refuge, rendering her presence at the office implausible. The implications crystallized. Lily had not absconded, she had made her decisive move. Now inhabiting Rebecca's life, she had supplanted the genuine Rebecca who remained in hiding. The case lingered unresolved. Lily Winters evaded capture, while Rebecca Thorne refrained from returning to her antecedent existence, instead creating a new persona at an undisclosed location. Detective Shaw retained a photograph on her desk, an image of 2 strikingly similar women. One was Rebecca Thorne, the other Lily Winters. Occasionally she scrutinized their visages, seeking disparities, the subtleties that would differentiate one from the other. The truly disconcerting aspect, Shaw imparted to fledgling detectives, is not that someone might resemble or sound like you. It is the fervor with which they desire to assume your identity, obliterating themselves in the process. Identity transcends mere appearance. It is our most precious possession, safeguarded zealously. At times, we only realize its worth when it is imperiled by another's covetous intent.